Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. A crisp wind swept through the forest, rustling leaves that shimmered silver under the moonlight. The towering pines and spruces formed a canopy so dense that the midnight rays struggled to find their way through. It was a night charged with electricity, an undercurrent of tension that made every creature in the area uneasy. Even the nocturnal birds, usually cooing or chirping, were silent, as though they sensed an ancient power awakening. Deep in this hush, Raniah crouched behind a gnarled oak, steadying her breath. She inhaled slowly, the metallic taste of impending violence searing the back of her throat. Years of hunting had taught her to move soundlessly, to let her heightened senses glean every detail from the world around her. Right now, she was certain that even the faintest snap of a twig could be her undoing. She had ventured far from the boundaries of her pack's territory, driven by a relentless determination that had become the axis of her life. It was the kind of zeal that made her heartbeat quicken with every step, yet kept her mind razor-sharp. Tonight, she had only one objective. She planned to sneak past any patrols, gather information on the elusive alpha of the Obsidian Ridge Pack, and, if an opportunity presented itself, strike a blow that would be felt across all werewolf domains. The mere thought of confronting him made her muscles tighten with anticipation. She had yearned for this moment for 3 years, ever since her brother's body was found broken and cold at the border of the forests. She had sworn on that dreadful night that she would avenge him. Tonight was another attempt in a long string of efforts to corner the alpha responsible for everything she had lost. Fog slithered in, curling around the roots of trees, obscuring Raniah's vision if she looked too far ahead. She carefully pressed her back against the oak, focusing on the faint glow of a distant lantern perched atop a watchtower that belonged to the Obsidian Ridge Scouts. Her hearing picked up a low murmur of conversation from 2 guards stationed near that flickering light. She couldn't see them clearly, but she knew their silhouettes would be outlined against the weak illumination if she inched closer. Yet she remained still, vigilant. Her hand hovered near the slim dagger strapped to her thigh, a blade etched with runic symbols rumored to be effective against werewolves of any rank. Even if an alpha's raw power surpassed everything else, this dagger represented a sliver of hope. It was an inheritance from her grandmother, a relic whispered to carry protective magic. She had once laughed at such notions. Now, she seized every advantage she could. She swallowed against a surge of memory. In her mind's eye, she saw her brother's warm grin as he ruffled her hair in the training yard, encouraging her to strike with more intent. He had always boasted that no one in their pack fought with more spirit than Raniah. That memory ignited something inside her, a quiet fury over what had been taken from her. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, forcing her emotions down, unwilling to let tears betray her position. Anger was the impetus for her mission, but letting that anger control her could cost her life. She needed a clear head, just as her brother would have wanted. That was how she would honor him, and how she intended to bring down the one she held responsible for his demise. The 2 guards near the tower began to move, their voices hushed. Raniah caught a snippet of their conversation. They complained about the chill in the air and wondered if the alpha would make a surprise inspection tonight. She heard one man remark that the alpha was restless lately, prowling the corridors of his fortress, as though consumed by an unseen agitation. The second guard hushed the first, warning him not to speak too openly. Rumors traveled fast, even in the darkness. There was no place for insubordination in a territory controlled by an alpha reputed for ruthlessness. Raniah's heart hammered. The possibility that her enemy was nearby fueled her determination. She wanted so badly to face him, yet her better judgment told her to wait. She had spent too many nights planning elaborate raids that failed because she acted too soon. She had nearly been captured once, barely escaping with superficial injuries. She was wiser now. Slipping into the territory undetected to gather intelligence was her primary goal. If fortune favored her, maybe she would glimpse the Alpha. She didn't expect an outright confrontation, not yet, but the mere chance to study his patterns, to gather the pack's guard rotations, and to figure out how best to corner him was too vital to pass up. The forest around the tower was teeming with the distinctive scents of wolves. She recognized the tang of sweat and the pungent musk that signaled a large pack. They must have had patrols circling every few minutes. Narrowing her eyes, she studied the line of tall pines that clustered near a small clearing. If she timed her movement perfectly, she could dart between the passing squads, avoid detection, and perhaps get closer to the pack's heart. But there was risk in every breath she took. She forced herself to remain calm, letting her senses expand. She could detect the faint scuff of boots a few yards away, the swish of tails, the stale breath of wolves who had likely shifted back into human form. Making a snap decision, she crept forward, one light step at a time. Her pulse thundered as she slipped from the trunk of the oak to a nearby cluster of shrubs. Each footfall was placed carefully, mindful of branches that could betray her presence with an echoing snap. The glow of the watchtower lantern flickered, and in that brief darkness she pushed ahead, having the distance between herself and the guards. Part of her wanted to confront them, to unleash the rage that smoldered inside. But that would be suicide. She was strong for her size, highly skilled, but going against two warriors deep in enemy territory would do nothing but bring more guards down upon her. So she squashed the temptation and forced herself to remain hidden. She needed to think like a huntress, not a berserker. She reached the edge of the clearing and sank down behind tall grass. She peered through the blades, watching the guards. One of them, a burly figure with a scar across his cheek, swung the lantern in a casual arc, scanning the perimeter. Raniah held her breath. The light slid over her position, but mercifully revealed only the foliage. She dared not exhale until the beam moved away. Her heart pounded louder than a war drum in her ears, but she refused to panic. Once the guard turned, she began to crawl, inch by inch, determined to circle around toward the center of the enemy's territory. She needed to get as close to the fortress as possible to confirm whether the Alpha was present or had left on one of his rumored raids. Though her body was tense with concentration, her mind latched onto the memory of what had driven her here. The day she found her brother's body had been etched into her heart forever. She had never experienced such cold, unfeeling terror. He was the last of her family, all their relatives taken by war, illness, or tragic accidents. She and her brother had clung to each other, forging a bond of unwavering loyalty. His death had left her unmoored, fueling an anger that burned so intensely that sometimes she felt it devour every fragment of compassion she had. The world had narrowed to a single purpose, to punish the Alpha rumored to have struck him down. A brush of sound to her right snapped her attention back to the present. She froze, muscles coiled, senses straining to pinpoint the threat. Through the grass, she glimpsed a large wolf, thick black fur glinting silver in the moonlight, padding silently. Its ears perked, nose twitching as it tested the air. Her heart lurched. One misstep, and she would be discovered. She knew that if a sentinel wolf caught her scent, it would be mere moments before alarms were raised. Her only advantage was that she was downwind. and she had masked her natural odor with a homemade mixture of herbs and creek mud that morning, something that might dull her distinct werewolf scent. She waited, terror mingling with steely resolve. The black wolf paused. Its golden eyes flicked over the grass in suspicion. Raniah remained motionless, not daring to even blink. Eventually, the creature continued on its patrol, seemingly convinced there was no threat. She exhaled slowly, every muscle shaking from the tension. With the wolf out of sight, she resumed her stealthy advance. Ahead, the watchtower gave way to a wide path illuminated by torches spaced at regular intervals. This must be a main route leading to the heart of the Obsidian Ridgepack's stronghold. Normally, the place would be crowded with pack members going about their duties, but at this late hour, it was eerily quiet, the air thick with expectancy. She hovered at the edge of the path, eyes scanning for movement, feeling her adrenaline spike. If she could cross that strip of open ground, a small cluster of boulders on the opposite side would provide cover. Then she could follow a winding route up toward the fortress. She counted to 3 in her head, willing her muscles to remain steady. Then she darted forward with fluid grace, a testament to her training. The run felt like the longest few seconds of her life, every stride accompanied by the awareness that she could be shot with an arrow or tackled by a wolf at any moment. When she reached the boulders, she nearly collapsed with relief, pressing herself against the cold stone, panting softly. Silence continued to reign, which meant she had managed to slip by unnoticed. That sense of triumph was short-lived, overshadowed by her knowledge that the greatest danger lay ahead. The fortress of the Obsidian Ridgepack loomed beyond a ridge that overlooked a small valley. Constructed of dark stone, it was rumored to be as old as any structure in werewolf lore, with walls thick enough to repel any invasion. Torches lined the battlements, and Raniah could just make out figures patrolling the parapets. Her mind buzzed with the weight of the danger she was courting. Yet she felt no desire to turn back. She was too close, as near as she had ever been to confronting the Alpha. She wanted to see him with her own eyes. Perhaps if she could catch a glimpse of him, she might quell the nightmares that plagued her, or she might find renewed conviction to bring him to his knees. She skirted the base of the ridge, moving slowly to stay within the embrace of shadowy rocks. As she slipped around a bend, her pulse kicked into overdrive. Guard towers on either side of the fortress gate were manned by alert sentries. Large, hulking wolves paced on the platform overhead. The distinct crest of the Obsidian Ridgepack, a wolf's head shaped from onyx stone, adorned the entrance. She felt a stab of hatred to see that sigil. She recalled how her own pack's symbol, a silver howling wolf, had been tarnished by grief when they carried her brother's body back. The funeral pyre lit the evening sky, and in that blaze she had realized her life's purpose, to avenge him. Grinding her teeth, she lowered herself behind a fallen log. The fortress seemed impenetrable. Even with her cunning and stealth, she would be a fool to attempt entering such a well-guarded place alone. But maybe she didn't need to. If the Alpha was known to roam, perhaps she could lie in wait, track his movements. If he rode out with a squad of warriors, there could be a vulnerable moment. The strategic side of her mind told her that no matter how fearsome or cunning an Alpha was, everyone had weaknesses. She just had to discover his. Pressing her ear to the ground, she sensed faint vibrations, hoofbeats, or the rumbling of wagons. Someone was traveling toward the fortress. If she could get a good vantage point, she might see who it was. Carefully, she climbed a nearby ledge, using the natural footholds in the ridge. Her muscles strained, but her years of training served her well. She reached the top, lying flat on her stomach amid scraggly shrubs. From there, she peered down at the fortress entrance. A caravan approached, led by 2 werewolves in human form, each guiding a horse-drawn cart filled with supplies. Renaya watched closely. The gate creaked open, torchlight spilling onto the clearing. She couldn't discern much detail about the figures waiting inside, but she saw shapes moving behind the heavy iron bars. Then, amid the swirl of activity, she spotted a tall, imposing presence stepping forward to speak with the newcomers. Her breath caught. Everything in his posture and the reverent way the guards looked at him told her this was someone of high rank. Was it him? The Alpha, rumored to have ended her brother's life. She strained to see more, but distance and darkness masked the figure's features. She could only make out broad shoulders, a proud stance, and a dominating aura that seemed to reach across the space, tangling in her senses. She felt her pulse quicken with rage, and an inexplicable fascination that made her frown. She had never encountered him directly. She wondered if he bore the coldness and brutality that stories said defined him. Tales from traveling merchants described him as a beast in human skin, unstoppable in battle, cunning as any warlord. She tried to swallow back the hatred, but it lodged in her throat. Just looking at him, or what little she could see, fanned the flames of her anger. Yet she couldn't deny a sliver of something else flitting through her mind, a strange pull she did not understand. She chalked it up to adrenaline. A rustling sound behind her jolted her from her thoughts. She reacted instinctively, rolling to her side as a figure lunged. A flash of steel glimmered in the moonlight. She narrowly avoided a dagger that sank into the soil where she had been lying. She sprang to her feet, crouching with lethal grace, meeting the attacker's eyes. A wiry man in leathers, his face set with grim determination, stood ready for a second strike. He must have been one of the fortress's scouts, patrolling the ridge. Her heart pounded. She had let her focus slip for just a moment, and now she was cornered on a ledge with nowhere to run except down a steep drop. His lips curled, but he didn't speak. He lunged again, blades slicing through the air. Raniah sidestepped, adrenaline surging in her veins. She drew her own dagger, the rune-necked blade that had once belonged to her grandmother. Sparks flew as the blades met. Twisting away from a second strike, she attempted a counter, but he was fast, clearly trained for close-quarters combat. She grit her teeth, refusing to let panic seep in. She had trained for moments like this. She deflected his next attack, stepping in quickly to strike at his chest. He yanked back just in time, the tip of her blade tearing his sleeve but not his skin. He hissed, feinting a slash that turned into a kick aimed at her ribs. She parried with her forearm, wincing as pain flared, but it wasn't enough to stop her. Quickly, she pivoted to the side, slashing at his midsection. This time, she drew blood. A sharp cry escaped his lips as he staggered, but he recovered almost instantly. Lunging for her throat, Raniah dropped into a low crouch, letting his momentum carry him forward. Then she swept out a leg to trip him. He stumbled, arms pinwheeling. In that split second, she drove her dagger into his side. His pained gasp rent the air. She knew the wound was deep. Red blossomed around the point of entry, and his eyes shone with desperation. He tried to speak, but blood bubbled on his lips. She hesitated, her heart pounding, a part of her wanting to spare him if he yielded. But the look in his eyes told her he wasn't about to surrender. He remained lethal until the last breath. She felt the scorching heat of his final attempt to slash her face. She ducked, gripping her dagger firmly and twisting. She had no other choice. If she showed mercy, he would kill her without hesitation. With a shudder, the scout collapsed. Raniah pulled back, feeling horror and a grim sense of necessity coil in her gut. She had taken a life tonight. Though she had resolved to kill the alpha, she had never been a murderer of innocents. But this man was no innocent, she reminded herself. He would have killed her if she had faltered. Wiping her blade on the grass, she realized the danger she was in. The scuffle had been brief, but sounds could carry. If others were in the area, they might investigate. She needed to leave, fast. Gazing down at the fortress, she realized any hope of further reconnaissance tonight was lost. She couldn't risk staying now that the troll had clearly found her. Her mind teemed with frustration. She was so close, yet she had no choice but to retreat. Still, she had spied a glimpse of the alpha. She suspected it had to be him, overseeing the caravan arrival with an imposing, silent authority. That small fragment of knowledge had to be enough for now. Testing the air for more patrols, she sensed none immediately, though the tang of blood from her fight was thick, and any passing wolf would catch it. She scrambled down the ridge, carefully avoiding open areas. Her limbs trembled with a mixture of relief and dread. If the dead scout was discovered soon, they would double their watch. It would become even harder to infiltrate next time. She cursed under her breath, wishing she had avoided confrontation altogether. Then she let out a slow exhale. There was no use in regrets. She had done what was necessary to stay alive. It took her nearly an hour to retrace her route back through the forest, circumventing the watchtower and its guards, who were still engrossed in their rounds, oblivious to the bloodshed on the ridge. She didn't let her guard down until she crossed a narrow creek that formed a natural border between the Obsidian Ridge domain and neutral territory. At last, she sank to her knees in the shallow water, letting the cool liquid wash away the mud and sweat that coated her skin. The night sky reflected in the rippling current, and she took a moment to let the rush of water carry away some of her tension. Her brother's face rose in her mind, unbidden. She clenched her fists, feeling the dampness of the water seep into her palms. "I'm close," she whispered into the night, voice trembling with the intensity of her promise. If her brother's spirit was watching, she wanted him to see that her vow remained firm. One day, she would stand victorious over the alpha who had torn her life apart. But beneath her rage lurked a glimmer of confusion. She remembered how her heart had wavered when she looked at that imposing silhouette at the fortress gate. Why had she experienced that unexplainable sense of pull, like a thread winding around her soul and tugging her forward? It was abnormal to feel such contradictory sensations, hatred and curiosity, loathing and intrigue. Shaking her head, she pushed the thoughts away, attributing them to adrenaline. The man was her mortal enemy. There was no room for any other sentiment. She pushed herself up, water dripping from her cloak. She needed to reach her pack's safe house, a small cabin tucked away in a corner of neutral land. There, she stored extra clothes, provisions, and a place to rest before moving on. Her mission was far from over. Killing the alpha would require more cunning. She needed to assemble every advantage, every scrap of knowledge, every alliance she could find. The time for impulsive revenge had passed. The next time she set foot in Obsidian Ridge territory, she vowed it would be with a flawless plan. As she set off at a brisk pace through the moonlit forest, she couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. The kill she had made tonight would not go unnoticed. She had spilled blood on land that was not her own. That alone would be cause for an unrelenting hunt. Part of her welcomed the challenge, seeing it as a chance to draw closer to the alpha. If he sent out search parties, she could pick them off one by one until he had no choice but to face her himself. But that approach was too risky. She couldn't be reckless, not if she wanted to survive long enough to achieve her goal. An hour later, she finally reached the isolated cabin. The small structure was hidden in a thicket, vines creeping over the exterior walls, blending it into the surrounding greenery. She slipped inside, bolting the door behind her. A single lantern hung by the fireplace, and she lit it, the flickering glow casting dancing shadows on the walls. The cabin was Spartan in its furnishings: a cot, a worn wooden table, a few shelves holding dried food and herbal concoctions. She shrugged out of her cloak, taking note of the gash in her left sleeve from the scout's blade. A trickle of blood stained her forearm, reminding her how close she had come to being taken down. She poured water into a basin, grimacing as she cleaned the wound. It wasn't deep, but it throbbed. She clenched her teeth, pressing a cloth soaked in a disinfecting solution against her skin. A hiss of pain escaped her lips. After that, she wrapped her arm in fresh bandages. Her reflection in a small mirror on the table caught her attention. Her face was smeared with dirt, her hazel eyes blazing with the embers of her emotions. Her dark hair, usually braided, had come loose in the fight, strands clinging to her cheeks. She stared at herself for a moment, letting the reality of the night's events settle in. She had failed to gather much information, but at least she had learned that the Alpha was still within his fortress. That was a start. Despite her exhaustion, she found it difficult to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the unknown scout collapsing, his lifeblood soaking the earth. She could almost smell the metallic tang of it in the cabin. She swallowed the guilt, reminding herself that this was war, that she was exacting retribution for her brother. There was no room for remorse. Still, it weighed on her. With a heavy sigh, she stripped off her wet clothes and changed into dry garments from a trunk near the cot. Then she settled onto the thin mattress, hugging herself in the silence. Only the soft crackle of the lantern flame kept her company. Images churned in her mind. Her brother laughing, the silhouette of the Alpha by torchlight, the fight on the ridge, and that nagging sense of an unexplainable pull. She tried to dismiss it once again. Emotions were not facts. Perhaps it was fear disguised as something else. That had to be it. She closed her eyes, determined to push aside every distraction. She would not waver. She had a mission, and she would see it through. Once the Alpha was dead, maybe her nightmares would finally fade. Maybe she would find peace. But the question haunted her. Why had fate spared him for so long if his hands were stained with her brother's blood? Could the moon goddess be so cruel as to allow that monster to thrive? She gritted her teeth, frustration burning in her chest. She had never questioned the moon goddess before, but doubt now lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Eventually, the weight of fatigue claimed her. Her breathing slowed, and her tense muscles loosened. Sleep was far from peaceful. Nightmares flared behind her eyelids, replaying her brother's final moments as she imagined them, alone in the cold forest, facing the Alpha's pack. She tossed and turned, sweat beading on her brow. At times, she caught glimpses of the Alpha's face, though she had never truly seen it, an amalgamation of shadows and rumors. Then, in the midst of those haunting images, a strange warmth permeated her dreams, a sudden shift in tone that made her heart flutter. She saw a large wolf with a powerful build stepping out of darkness, half of its body bathed in moonlight, the other half swallowed in shadow. It didn't attack her. Instead, it gazed at her with an intensity that held neither anger nor kindness. Its eyes glowed an uncanny shade that made her breath catch. Her chest tightened. She felt an odd mixture of fear and an inexplicable yearning. But then the dream shattered, leaving her cold and alone in an endless black void. Raniah jolted awake, her heart hammering so hard it threatened to break her ribcage. She sat up, taking ragged breaths. Dawn was filtering through the small window, painting the cabin's interior with a pale golden light. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady herself. "What was that?" she whispered, unsettled. She had never experienced such a vivid dream. Shaking her head, she told herself it was merely the side effect of stress and exhaustion. Dreams had no bearing on reality. She wouldn't let them rattle her. Still, the memory of that piercing gaze lingered, burrowing into the corners of her mind. She forced herself to stand, stretching the stiffness from her limbs. She had no time for fear of illusions. There were tasks to handle. She needed more allies, more resources, and the next phase of her plan demanded that she meet with a contact in a nearby human settlement. She rummaged through the trunk for a cloak that would help her blend in among travelers. She also grabbed a small satchel of coins, which she had earned over the years doing odd jobs for both humans and supernaturals. Money opened doors, bought favors, and sometimes silence. As she prepared to set out, she mentally rehearsed the story she would tell if the guards in that settlement became suspicious. She would pose as a simple traveler searching for work. Most humans were unaware of the intricacies of werewolf politics, so it was relatively easy to blend in if one was careful. She left the cabin, making sure to hide any sign of her presence. She scattered leaves over her footprints and cleared the ashes from the cold fireplace. Then, slipping outside, she walked into the emerging warmth of the early morning sun. By midday, she reached the outskirts of the nearest human town, Golden Leaf Crossing. The name came from the maple trees that turned a brilliant shade of gold in autumn, though now it was late spring, and the leaves were still lush and green. The settlement had grown around a bustling marketplace, where traders sold everything from farm produce to handcrafted wares. She saw a steady flow of travelers, including families in horse-drawn wagons, merchants on foot, and a handful of weary knights returning from some distant campaign. This constant activity offered a perfect place to disappear in plain sight. She wound her way through the market stalls, inhaling the scent of fresh bread and spiced meats. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she had not eaten since before her nighttime infiltration. But first, she needed to locate her contact. Rumor said that a rogue werewolf named Bryce sometimes did business here, dealing in information, illegal enchantments, and anything that could turn a profit in the underworld. He was known to trade secrets to the highest bidder, though he walked a precarious line between all the werewolf packs. Raniah had only met him once before, exchanging pleasantries at a black market gathering. He was wary, but if she offered enough coin, he might be persuaded to share details about the Obsidian Ridge Pack's defenses. She found Bryce where she had been told he usually loitered, a small inn on the western side of Golden Leaf Crossing, overshadowed by an ancient oak that had grown so wide its branches nearly covered the roof. Entering the inn, she was met with the heavy smell of ale and the murmur of conversation. A bard plucked a lute in the corner, singing softly about mythical heroes. Renaya kept her hood low, scanning the room until her gaze landed on a lanky man with sandy hair pulled back in a rough ponytail. He sat in a booth with his legs stretched across the bench, a cocky grin aimed at a barmaid who was serving him. She recognized him instantly as Bryce. She approached, careful not to draw attention. Sliding into the seat opposite him, she kept her voice low. "Heard, you deal in knowledge," she said softly. Bryce arched an eyebrow, his lips curving into a smirk. "Depends on who's asking, and how much they're paying," he responded, swirling the ale in his mug. His eyes flicked to her hood, but he didn't immediately challenge her secrecy. She placed a small purse of coins on the table between them. I need every detail you can provide on the Obsidian Ridge Fortress and its Alpha. I'm looking for guard schedules, secret passageways, safe routes, and any vulnerabilities. The more precise the information, the more gold you get. Bryce snorted, a hint of skepticism in his gaze. Planning to break in for a midnight party? The Obsidian Ridge Alpha doesn't take kindly to uninvited guests. She didn't rise to his taunt, instead letting a steely resolve show in her eyes as she pulled back her hood. My business is my own, she said plainly. Do you have the intel or not? His gaze swept over her features, and he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as well. I have bits and pieces, but that fortress is nearly impossible to infiltrate. I've heard rumors that the Alpha has a network of loyal followers in surrounding towns, paying them to relay any suspicious sightings. If you plan to set foot in his territory, watch your back. Raniah's throat tightened. She already knew how dangerous it was. I'll take whatever scraps of knowledge you have, she replied, and I'll compensate you fairly. But if I find out your information is false, you'll regret it. Bryce chuckled, though his eyes flashed wariness. So cold and stern. All right, I'll share what I've got, though it might be incomplete. I do know the Alpha has a second in command, a beta by the name of Roan, who is in charge of external security. Word is, if you manage to slip past the beta's carefully monitored guard rotations, you might find an older, disused entrance at the fortress's eastern wall. It's usually sealed, but for the right price I can get you a partial map. It's old, so not all the passages might be accurate. Some could have collapsed or been rebuilt. Still, it's a lead. She weighed his words. A hidden entrance could be the best shot at slipping inside, if she had a reason to. What about the Alpha himself? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. How often does he leave the fortress? Bryce shrugged, tapping the side of his mug. Not as often as people think. He's known for being reclusive, only venturing out when absolutely necessary. A few times a year, he'll lead hunts or diplomatic missions to other packs. Lately, though, rumors say he's been restless, patrolling his own territory at random hours. Some say he's searching for something or someone. Raniah's stomach twisted. Searching for something or someone? Could it be that he suspected her presence? Or was he involved in some greater scheme? Either way, she needed to remain on high alert. I need that map, she said firmly, pushing more coins across the table. And any additional details on the beta, the guards, anything. Every scrap could prove useful. Bryce deftly pocketed the gold. Wait here, he told her. I'll head upstairs to fetch it. Keep your voice down, though. We don't want curious ears picking up on this conversation. She nodded, adjusting her hood back over her head, scanning the inn while he disappeared. Most patrons were too engrossed in their meals or hushed discussions to pay her any mind. But one man, sitting alone near the window, kept glancing her way. She couldn't be sure if it was mere coincidence, but her instincts prickled with unease. She rested her hand near her dagger, ready to react if needed. Bryce returned a few minutes later, sliding a rolled parchment into her hand. It cost me a fortune to get someone to sketch that, he muttered. Treat it with care, or don't. Once we part ways, it's none of my concern. She slipped the parchment inside her cloak. Pleasure doing business with you, she said curtly, rising to leave. She felt the watchful gaze from the man at the window intensify. Quickly, she moved for the door, passing the barmaid and stepping out into the bright afternoon sun. The bustle of the marketplace swirled around her, but she noticed the man from inside following a few steps behind. Her pulse quickened. Could he be working for the Alpha or the Beta? Scouring for suspicious activity? She quickened her pace, weaving through the crowd, using her heightened senses to locate an exit path that might lead her away from the throng. If she got cornered in the open, it could turn messy. She circled around a stall selling aromatic spices, turning sharply into a narrow alley that ran behind the taverns. She pressed herself against the wall, concealed by a stack of crates. Her heart thudded in her chest as she heard footsteps approach. They paused near the alley's entrance. She suppressed her breathing, staying as still as possible. A tense moment passed. Then the footsteps receded, continuing down the main street. Renaya waited a few extra seconds to be certain the man was gone before she finally slipped out of hiding. She resisted the urge to breathe a sigh of relief. She was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes only seemed to grow higher. Holding the map against her side, she realized how desperate her crusade had become. She would do anything, strike any deal, to bring down the Alpha of the Obsidian Ridge Pack. By the time she left Goldenleaf Crossing behind, the sun dipped lower, bathing the landscape in a warm glow. She made her way back toward the cabin, her thoughts a tangled mass of fury and determination. She had the beginnings of a plan forming in her mind, but it hinged on whether or not Bryce's map proved useful. If the rumored passage still existed, she could try an infiltration under cover of darkness, maybe set a trap. Yet a dark undercurrent of uncertainty gnawed at her. The memory of that eerie dream, coupled with the strange pull she'd felt when she saw the Alpha's silhouette, weighed heavily. She told herself she was merely exhausted. Perhaps the illusions of her mind were playing tricks, reminding her that hate could sometimes feel like something else in the heat of the moment. Before she reached the cabin, she decided to set up a small fire in a secluded clearing, far enough from the main path to avoid detection. She wanted to examine the map before returning to her sanctuary. In case she was being tracked, it would be easier to flee from this open space than from inside the cabin. Gathering sticks and branches, she lit a fire, then waited until it burned steadily. Taking out the parchment, she unrolled it with care. By the dancing flames, she scanned the rough sketch. It depicted the outer walls of the fortress, marked with a few lines indicating interior hallways. The eastern side showed a faded note labeling A sealed entry, but there were no details on how big it was or how to unseal it. She traced the lines with her fingertip, memorizing the layout, considering possible escape routes if she managed to get inside. She also noticed a small chamber near the fortress's center. A scribbled annotation read, "Alpha's quarters?" with a question mark. It seemed Bryce's source wasn't entirely sure. Still, any clue was better than none. She folded the map and placed it in her satchel, grateful for the advantage it might provide. The wind shifted, and she caught the scent of pine and damp earth. Closing her eyes, she tried to center herself. Her brother's voice seemed to echo in her thoughts, urging her to remain cautious and strong. The quest she pursued was fraught with danger, and if she fell, there would be no one left to carry on their family name. She allowed a single tear to slip down her cheek, remembering his playful banter, how he always scolded her for taking risks. "You'd better be watching over me, big brother," she whispered, letting the fire crackle fill the silence. She had no illusions that this mission would be easy. Perhaps she would have to wait for weeks, or even months, for the right moment to strike. Vengeance was a patient creature, she reminded herself. She would wait for the perfect time to face the Alpha. Yet there was a part of her that was impatient, a part that wanted to run back to that fortress and demand justice with her blade. For now, she swallowed that impatience, knowing it would lead only to foolish mistakes. Gradually, she doused the fire, making sure to scatter the ashes. Night was falling once more, and she had a short distance left to travel before reaching the cabin. Every step she took, she remained alert, scanning for any sign of pursuers. The forest was quiet, the hush broken only by the rustle of nocturnal creatures. A deer darted away upon hearing her footstep. An owl hooted from a distant branch. She inhaled the scent of moss and bark, trying to calm the swirl of thoughts in her head. When she finally arrived at the cabin, she slipped inside, locking the door behind her. She lit a candle on the table, its soft glow illuminating the small space. Exhaustion claimed her, but her mind refused to rest. She laid out the map, scanning it over and over, forcing herself to memorize every corner. Then she started listing supplies she would need: specialized gear to climb walls, potions or herbs to mask her scent, and more silver-tipped blades in case the fortress was crawling with elite guards. She would have to stock up carefully, perhaps from traveling merchants or from small black market stalls like the one Bryce frequented. The risk was high, but she had no other choice. This was her destiny now. In the flickering candlelight, she allowed her mind to wander for a brief moment to the possible future. If she succeeded in slaying the Alpha, what came after? Would the pack crumble? Would chaos reign? Or would another step in to fill his role? She realized she hadn't thought much beyond her revenge. Her entire being was focused on that singular act. She took a shaky breath. Maybe after she ended this, she could find a life elsewhere, free from the shadows that haunted her. But as soon as that fragile hope surfaced, her grief for her brother washed it away. She would not allow herself contentment until the Alpha paid for his actions. She forced herself to lie down on the cot, though she doubted sleep would come easily. Tonight, she didn't have the energy for nightmares. She closed her eyes, determined to let her body recover. Tomorrow, she would begin the next step in her plan. She needed to approach this methodically, gathering every possible advantage. Vengeance was close enough to taste, but also miles away if she let mistakes creep in. Despite her racing thoughts, eventually her body gave into the tug of exhaustion. As she drifted off, her final conscious feeling was a coiling tension in her chest, a dreadful anticipation of the moment she would come face to face with the Alpha. Her heart clenched as she imagined it. She saw herself poised to strike, dagger in hand, while he stood unarmed, gazing at her with unreadable eyes. Rage pulsed through her, yet beneath it, some alien emotion flickered. Then, everything faded into darkness, and she surrendered to uneasy sleep. Early dawn light filtered through the window, casting faint shadows across the cabin floor. Raniah stirred, her muscles still stiff from the previous day's exertions, and she felt the dull ache of the wound on her forearm where the scout had nearly slashed her. She grimaced as she unwrapped the bandage, checking the scab that had formed. It stung when touched, but it wasn't infected. That was a small blessing. She rose from the cot, running a hand through her tangled hair. Though she had managed a few hours of rest, her mind already buzzed with concerns about the day ahead. A plan as dangerous as hers demanded preparation and cunning. She couldn't afford to be sloppy. She stepped to the table, where she had left Bryce's map. In the dim morning light, she traced the lines again, memorizing each curve of the fortress walls and the potential sealed entrance. If this sketch was genuine, she had a chance to access the fortress from an area that might be less guarded. But it was still a massive risk. She had to consider every angle. Would it be better to surprise the Alpha during one of his rumored patrols rather than infiltrate his stronghold? Each option came with pitfalls. The fortress was brimming with loyal warriors. Ambushing him in the forest meant dealing with unpredictably shifting variables. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Sometimes it felt like she was planning a battle for an entire army, yet she was just one wolf. Even the bravest soldier would think twice before storming the gates of Obsidian Ridge. But her hatred burned bright, driving her forward. She couldn't ignore the pull of vengeance that threaded through her every waking moment. As she rolled up the map, she reminded herself of the time she had bested opponents twice her size in training. She was no ordinary fighter. She had honed her instincts, refined her speed. If she timed everything perfectly, she could outmaneuver them. It was audacious, but not impossible. Her thoughts turned toward resources. She only had a handful of silver-edged weapons, which might not even be enough if she came up against multiple guards. She needed something more potent, a trump card that could tip the balance. She recalled the stories of certain potions that could weaken an alpha or temporarily suppress a werewolf's ability to shift. Such mixtures were forbidden in most packs, but on the black market, anything could be obtained for a price. If she could acquire even a single vial, it might give her the edge she needed. She gnawed on her lower lip, wondering if she should risk seeking out another illicit contact. Word could spread that she was stockpiling dangerous items. Still, she had no choice. Taking down a pack leader demanded extraordinary measures. After a meager breakfast of dried jerky and fresh water from a nearby stream, she slung her satchel over her shoulder and left the cabin again. She moved cautiously through the forest, staying alert. She intended to head to a different settlement, one slightly farther away, where less savory merchants were rumored to gather. By mid-morning, she found a well-worn path branching off from the main road. Travelers seldom used this route because it wound deeper into the wilderness, where roving bandits and lone rogues were a constant hazard. But Raniah knew exactly where it led. A hidden trading post that functioned outside of conventional laws. As she traveled, the trees thinned, giving way to rocky terrain scattered with low shrubs. The sun climbed higher, warming the back of her neck. With each step, she reminded herself to remain calm. She couldn't let the tension building inside her sabotage her interactions. If she appeared desperate, the merchants might sense an opportunity to overcharge her or, worse, betray her to the highest bidder. She needed to maintain a facade of control. By midday, she reached the trading post, a ragtag collection of tents and wooden shacks erected around a natural hot spring. Steam drifted lazily, curling into the air, giving the place an almost otherworldly ambiance. Rough-looking individuals milled about, some examining crates of goods, others sipping cheap ale at makeshift tables. Raniah scanned the scene. She noticed a few familiar faces, rogues she had encountered once or twice, recognized by the scars or the distinctive way they carried themselves. They gave her curt nods, neither friendly nor hostile. In these parts, neutrality was the closest thing to civility. She moved among the stalls, checking each vendor. One sold battered swords and axes. Another offered used armor with questionable origins. She moved on until she spotted a stall draped in tattered black cloth, the front laden with glass bottles, pouches of herbs, and small vials filled with liquids in various hues. The stall-keeper was an older woman with sharp, calculating eyes, her hair braided into intricate plaits that hung past her shoulders. Raniah approached carefully, glancing at the items on display. "Looking for something to ease your aches, or are you searching for something more potent?" the woman asked, her tone sly. She noticed Raniah's interest in the vials and tapped one with a long fingernail. "I have brews to calm the mind, to quell pain, to induce sleep. For the right price, I even have concoctions that can disrupt certain shall we say, predatory instincts. Raniah's heart beat faster. I need a potion that can weaken a strong werewolf temporarily, she said bluntly. There was little point in mincing words here. The stall-keeper's smile widened. Ah, a dangerous request, she purred. But not impossible. It will cost you. And I cannot guarantee how long it will last on your target. The stronger the wolf, the quicker they might shake off its effects. Are you certain you want to rely on such a gamble? Raniah didn't flinch. Name your price, she said, opening her satchel to show a small bag of coins. The woman's eyes sparkled with greed. Very well, she replied. For a single vial, I'll need triple what you're showing me. And I want an additional favor. Should I call upon you for a task in the future, you won't refuse. Raniah's jaw tightened. These were the kind of deals that could come back to haunt her. But she saw no alternative. Fine, she muttered. But I need assurance that this potion can affect someone of alpha rank. The stall-keeper shrugged with feigned nonchalance. I'm no miracle worker. If you get close enough to administer it, through a wound or by ingestion, it should slow them down, disrupt their ability to focus, maybe even block their shift if you time it right, but the effects won't last long. And if you fail to deliver a lethal blow while they're weakened, you'll have a very angry alpha on your hands. Raniah swallowed. Understood. I'll make it count. She handed over the required coins, her stomach twisting at the sheer amount she was giving up. This was a fortune in her terms. And now she was also bound by a favor she might have to repay later. The woman grinned, producing a small metal case. Inside it lay a single vial containing a dark green liquid that glinted ominously in the sunlight. She handed it over to Raniah with a warning glance. Be careful, the stall-keeper whispered. This brew is as likely to kill you as it is to kill your target if you're not cautious. Don't let the vile stuff touch your skin. Use gloves or pour it onto your blade at the last second. Raniah nodded, tucking the vial into a padded pouch in her satchel. She had the means now. All she needed was the opportunity. She stepped away from the stall, scanning the trading post one more time. A few rogues eyed her with veiled curiosity, but no one approached. Satisfied she had acquired what she came for, she made her way back to the path, leaving the swirl of steam and the muted chatter behind. On the return journey, she planned her next move. If the sealed entrance indicated on Bryce's map proved real, she could attempt an infiltration under the cover of night. She would coat her weapon with the potion, strike swiftly, and end the Alpha's life. That vision played in her mind. A swift, precise kill, the weight of her brother's memory fueling her every motion. She felt a pang of nerves, but also a thrill of anticipation. After so many years of despair, it was finally within reach. Yet, a persistent voice in her head asked questions she didn't want to answer. Would the Alpha cower before her blade, or would he fight back with the savage strength that made him legend? Could she truly see this plan through, or would doubt weaken her at the crucial moment? She shook off the uncertainty. Her entire life, from the day her brother's corpse was found, had led her to this. She wouldn't turn back now. As the sun reached its zenith, she slipped back into the forest, choosing a winding route to avoid detection. She paused at a small stream to refill her water skin, listening to birds chirping overhead. She tried to calm her racing thoughts by focusing on the gentle flow of water. But no matter how serene the surroundings, the turmoil inside her raged on. Even her wolf within, usually a source of inner strength, felt restless, prowling just beneath the surface of her consciousness. The creature sensed the nearness of a pivotal moment. and it yearned for action. When she finally reached her cabin again, the afternoon was waning, the sky turning a pale pink near the horizon. She entered quietly, checking the perimeter first to ensure there were no signs of intrusion. Satisfied she was alone, she barricaded the door. Once inside, she unpacked her newly acquired potion, carefully setting it aside. She gathered her weapons on the table, a silver-edged short sword, 2 daggers, and a handful of throwing knives. She would have to plan meticulously how to carry and apply the toxic brew during a fight. A single misstep could poison her just as easily as her target. She rummaged through her supplies until she found a pair of leather gloves. After testing their fit, she decided they would suffice for handling the potion. Outside, dusk settled, the forest cloaked in deepening shadows. Renaya knew she should rest, but her mind churned with the weight of her decisions. She sat on the edge of the cot, replaying the image of the Alpha she had glimpsed at the fortress gate, the powerful figure addressing his subordinates, the aura of authority so tangible even from a distance. She clenched her hands, resentment flaring again. "Soon," she murmured, as if speaking to her absent brother. "It ends soon." A part of her wanted to march straight into Obsidian Ridge territory tonight, but she forced herself to remain patient. She needed to carefully evaluate the sealed entrance marked on the map. It was too dangerous to rush without reconnaissance. Besides, she wanted the cover of a moonless night, or at least one where clouds masked the sky. Any advantage in stealth could be the difference between success and failure. She spread the map out once more, mentally walking through the route she would take, the obstacles, the guard locations, the potential pitfalls. She formulated backup plans for each stage, a tangle of contingencies. Her brother's voice seemed to echo in her head. "Always expect the unexpected," he used to say. She blinked away a surge of emotion. She was doing this for him. Time crawled by, and she kept reviewing her strategy until her eyes grew heavy. At last, exhaustion overcame her worry, and she stretched out on the cot. Sleep was fitful, a swirling mess of memories, dread, and fleeting glimpses of that large black wolf with glowing eyes. She tossed and turned, a sheen of sweat forming on her brow, until she woke at dawn, gasping. This time the dream had ended with the wolf's muzzle pressed close to her face, as though it wanted to speak. Her pulse thundered. "It's just a nightmare," she told herself in a trembling whisper. Yet it felt like a sign, an omen she couldn't decipher. She swung her legs off the cot, inhaling deeply to steady her nerves. The day of reckoning was close at hand. She decided she would leave that evening, take her time reaching the fortress under the cover of darkness. By the time she arrived, it would be near midnight, hopefully the quietest hour. Then she would find the sealed entrance, break in if possible, and make her way to the Alpha's quarters. If fortune smiled, she would be in and out before any alarm could be raised, leaving the fortress reeling from the death of its leader. She gathered her gear, packing everything carefully. She bundled up the potion in layers of cloth, placed it in a waterproof pouch, and tucked it next to her daggers. She rolled up the map and tied it securely, planning to carry it until the last moment in case she needed to double-check her route. After a sparse breakfast, she spent the morning training, going through her customary routines, footwork drills, knife-throwing practice, and agility exercises. Each movement was precise, fueled by the knowledge that this could be her final day if she failed. She practiced drawing her dagger in tandem with pretending to apply the potion. Over and over, she repeated the sequence until her hands moved with mechanical efficiency. She couldn't afford a single slip. As the sun climbed higher, she tried to conserve her energy. The hardest part of her mission would take place after sunset. She closed her eyes and meditated briefly, seeking a calm center amid the storm of her emotions. The hours passed in tense anticipation. Finally, as dusk draped the forest in dusky gold, she rose, slung her satchel across her back, and set off. Her nerves tingled with every step, but her resolve never wavered. The journey through the darkening woods was both familiar and fraught. Memories of her failed attempts and narrow escapes resurfaced, but she pushed them aside. This time had to be different. She was armed with new knowledge and a lethal advantage. She moved quietly, her werewolf senses sharpened by adrenaline. The rustle of a rabbit darting away was enough to make her pause, scanning the shadows for watchers. But only the night answered her, with its gentle hush and the distant call of nocturnal birds. By the time she neared Obsidian Ridge territory, the moon was hidden behind a spread of clouds. Torches glimmered in the far distance, outlining the fortress walls. She crouched behind a stand of bushes, steeling herself. With painstaking care, she circled wide around the main path, seeking the eastern side. Her heart fluttered when she finally saw the portion of the wall Bryce's map had labeled Sealed Entrance. From a distance, it appeared as an unremarkable stretch of stone, covered in ivy and half-buried rubble. But she trusted the map. She just prayed it was accurate. Slipping between the trees, she surveyed the area. No guards were in sight, though she knew that could change if a patrol wandered by. She recalled the estimated timing of patrol rotations she had gleaned in her earlier reconnaissance. Every 20 minutes or so, a group of wolves circled this section. She would have to work fast. Once she was certain no one was nearby, she dashed across a clearing to the base of the wall. Up close, she noticed faint lines in the masonry that suggested an outline of a doorway. The stones at the center appeared more weathered, the mortar crumbly. She carefully tested a portion of the ivy, pulling it aside. Beneath, she spotted ancient hinges, rusted almost to disintegration. This had to be the sealed door. She started clearing debris, working as quietly as possible. The mortar was weaker than she expected, and after a few minutes of prying with her dagger, a chunk of stone fell away. Her pulse hammered. She paused, listening for signs of alarm, but none came. Encouraged, she kept going, widening a small gap. When she peeked inside, she could see darkness beyond, presumably a corridor or storage area. The opening was barely large enough for her to squeeze through, so she removed her satchel, slid it in first, then slipped her body through the gap, wincing as rough edges scraped her arms. Her boots scuffed against a stone floor on the other side. She found herself in a cramped hallway that smelled of damp and age. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and dust coated everything. Her heart pounded with a mixture of triumph and dread. She was inside the fortress. The real test had just begun. She held still, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. She listened intently. The corridor seemed deserted. She could hear distant footsteps echoing along the upper levels, but nothing close enough to worry her yet. She slipped on her gloves and removed the potion from her satchel, tucking it into a side pouch on her belt for easier access. If she came face to face with the Alpha, she needed to be able to apply it to her blade, swiftly. The rest of her gear stayed in the satchel, though she kept one dagger in hand. Step by careful step, she inched down the hallway, following what she remembered from Bryce's map. If the layout was correct, she would eventually reach a cross-section that connected to a spiral staircase leading up to the main floors. That was where she hoped to locate the Alpha's quarters. As she moved deeper, she encountered signs of more recent use. A few footprints in the dust, old crates stacked against the walls. Perhaps the fortress inhabitants sometimes used these forgotten corridors for storage. She kept her breathing shallow, every sense on high alert. The stone walls rose around her, lit only by the faint flicker of torches from the upper levels that reached through cracks in the ceiling. She caught snippets of conversation drifting down from above, but the words were indistinct. Then, she heard something that made her freeze, a low growl echoing just ahead. She pressed herself against the wall, dousing any hint of her presence. 2 wolves in their animal forms padded into view, the troll hounds apparently checking lower tunnels. Their keen eyes reflected in the dim light, and their muzzles parted to sniff the musty air. Raniah's heart thundered. She hugged the wall, praying the herb she used to mask her scent still lingered. The wolves paused, ears pricked. She didn't dare move. The seconds dragged on like hours. Finally, one wolf gave a small huff and turned, leaving the other farther down the passage. Raniah waited until they disappeared around a bend before she exhaled, her breath shaky. She had avoided detection by the narrowest margin. Pressing forward, she found the spiral staircase. It coiled upward, ancient and worn from countless footsteps. She rested her hand on the railing, testing her weight on each step to avoid any creaking. Despite her caution, a slight groan of stone sounded as she ascended. She froze, heart pounding, but no alarm was raised. Slowly, she continued, climbing until she reached a corridor lit by a lone torch and a bracket. She glanced left and right, trying to orient herself to the fortress layout. If the map was even half accurate, the Alpha's private quarters should be in a wing accessible through a set of ornate double doors near the Great Hall. But she couldn't risk the heavily guarded main passage. Instead, she recalled a side route that supposedly led around the back of the banquet rooms, possibly connecting to the Alpha's wing. She just had to find it. With silent footsteps, she navigated deeper into the fortress, passing doors that led to storerooms and armories. Occasionally, she heard voices from beyond the walls. A guard's idle chatter or a servant's scurrying footsteps. She pressed herself into alcoves whenever she felt movement near. Her nerves were stretched taut, the adrenaline in her veins singing a grim lullaby. She knew time was not on her side. Eventually, someone would discover the broken mortar or notice an intruder lurking in the corridors. Finally, she spotted a corridor branching to the right, less lit than the others. It sloped slightly upward, suggesting it could lead to the more opulent sections. She slipped into it, flattening herself against the wall. Her senses screamed caution as she approached an intersection. Quietly peering around the corner, she saw a large set of wooden doors with intricate carvings, the shape of wolves intertwined in a circle. Her mouth went dry. This had to be an entrance to the Alpha's domain. 2 guards stood watch, both in human form, but fully armed. She ducked back, considering her options. She might slip past them if she caused a distraction, or she could try to take them out swiftly. But the moment they fell, others might come running. A quick scan revealed a side door just behind her, possibly a servant's passage. It was worth checking. If it connected to the main suite, she might bypass the guards entirely. Taking a measured breath, she eased the door open. It creaked softly, and she winced, but no one seemed to hear. Inside was a narrow service hallway used for staff to move unnoticed through the fortress. It was unlit, but enough light filtered in from the corridor that she could see the outlines of the walls. She slipped inside, carefully closing the door behind her. The passage curved around, and after several yards, a second door appeared on the right. She prayed it led to the Alpha's quarters. Her hands shook with a mix of eagerness and dread. This was it, the threshold of her vengeance. Grasping the latch, she eased it open. Immediately, she was greeted by the dim glow of a single candle, and the smell of rich incense. She stepped through, heart thunderous, and found herself in a spacious room furnished with a large bed draped in furs, a massive wooden desk strewn with papers, and tall windows that overlooked the courtyard below. This had to be the Alpha's private chamber. It was empty at the moment, which set relief flooding through her, but also raised questions. Where was he? She moved toward the desk, scanning the documents. Most were unreadable at a glance, references to treaties or supply lists. Her heart pounded as she realized she was out in the open, vulnerable. Any second, the Alpha or one of his attendants could walk in. Swallowing hard, she tested the air. A powerful male scent lingered, making her senses tingle. She recognized it from that night at the fortress gate. Raw authority, tempered by an undercurrent of wild energy. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. He was close. Her wolf within stirred, an uneasy mix of rage and another sensation she couldn't name. She gritted her teeth, reminding herself that she wasn't here to analyze her emotions, but to finish him. With trembling hands, she slid the toxic vial from her belt pouch. She uncorked it, being careful not to inhale the fumes. Its sharp scent made her eyes water. She dripped the greenish liquid onto her dagger's blade, coating it in a thin layer, then corked the vial again and set it aside on the desk. She put on a fresh pair of gloves, knowing the slightest slip could end her life as well. Now, she had to wait, or else risk roaming the fortress in search of him. She positioned herself near the door, pressing against the wall so she wouldn't be immediately visible. If he entered, she could strike swiftly, hopefully delivering a fatal wound before he could react. But as the minutes ticked by, doubts gnawed at her. What if he didn't come? What if he was already out on patrol? She felt the pull of time, the risk of discovery increasing. Just as she was about to consider slipping out to search elsewhere, she heard footsteps in the corridor. Heavy, measured strides that radiated command. Her heart leapt. This was it. She raised the dagger, muscles coiled to attack. The door handle turned, and the door swung open. He stepped in, shutting it behind him. The flickering candlelight revealed an imposing figure with dark hair, his posture exuding effortless confidence. Raniah's first impression was how tall he was, how the broad planes of his shoulders spoke of formidable strength. He wore plain black trousers and a fitted tunic, as though he'd dismissed ceremonial garb for something more practical. She expected the scowl of a monster, but instead, she saw a proud, refined face, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that flickered with amber intensity. Those eyes held complexities she hadn't anticipated. Her breath caught. This was the murderer of her brother, or so she believed. Fury erupted inside her, overshadowing the strange stir of recognition she felt upon seeing him. She lunged, silent as a shadow, aiming the dagger at his torso. Time seemed to slow. He turned at the last second, his reflexes astonishing. Her blade met fabric, grazing his side. She felt a momentary resistance before he twisted away, blocking her wrist with an iron grip. She let out a snarl, baring her teeth, attempting to press the dagger home. But his strength was beyond anything she'd encountered. He shoved her back, sending her stumbling. She recovered quickly, adrenaline surging. He clutched his side where the blade had torn his tunic. A small stain of blood appeared, but the wound looked shallow. She cursed inwardly he might have only a minute dose of the poison in his system. Would it be enough to weaken him? She circled warily, dagger at the ready. He didn't immediately attack, though. He stared at her, chest heaving, amber eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else. You. His voice was deep, resonating with anger and disbelief. How did you get in here? Renaya ignored the question. She feinted a slash at his neck, then pivoted to strike his ribs. He parried with inhuman speed, grabbing her arm. She felt his palm pressing against her shoulder as he tried to disarm her. Tremors shot through his body, and she realized the poison was taking effect, albeit slowly. Desperate to exploit the opening, she wrested her arm free and tried another thrust. He managed to dodge, though not as gracefully as before. Sweat broke out on his forehead, and his breathing turned labored. Satisfaction flared in Raniah's chest. She was winning. She would avenge her brother right here. She pressed her advantage, each strike more aggressive than the last. Yet, even weakened, he was a formidable opponent. He dodged or blocked her blows with uncanny instincts, each movement frustrating her attempts to land a decisive stab. At one point, their eyes locked. She glimpsed raw confusion in his gaze, as though he were grappling with a shocking realization. She felt a disconcerting jolt of awareness bloom within her, too. Her wolf howled in the recesses of her mind, a cry that made her chest tighten painfully. She stumbled, nearly losing her balance. This gave him an opening. He slammed an elbow into her midsection. The wind rushed from her lungs as she staggered, vision swimming. He advanced, but the poison made him falter. His expression tightened in pain. She pounced on the opportunity, slashing at his throat. He raised an arm to block, and her blade sliced a shallow cut across his bicep. The shock of the wound forced him back. She tried to press forward, ignoring her own pain, fueled by anger and the memory of her brother. She roared, going for the kill. Yet at the last second, he stepped aside, seizing her wrist in an iron grip. His free hand closed around her other arm, forcing her to drop the dagger. It clattered on the stone floor. Rage flared, and she struggled, but he held her firm, even as she felt tremors course through his muscles. His breathing was ragged, the poison obviously coursing through his veins, but he refused to collapse. "Stop this," he growled, voice rough. She twisted in his grasp, trying to free a hand to grab another weapon, but he shoved her against the wall. She hissed, baring her teeth, refusing to submit. His gaze bored into hers, amber eyes sparking with an intensity that felt like a brand on her soul. Something indescribable flickered within her, a sensation that sparked in the depths of her chest. She felt a maddening swirl of emotions, hatred, grief, and, inexplicably, the faint stirring of recognition. "Why do I feel?" he began, but then he grimaced, clearly in pain. The poison was racking his system. She glared at him, refusing to be moved by his confusion. "You killed my brother," she spat. "This ends tonight." His brow furrowed, a flash of genuine bewilderment crossing his features. "I don't know your brother," he rasped, leaning heavily on the wall to keep her pinned. "You must have the wrong Lees!" she shouted, her voice cracking. She tried to slam her head forward, aiming to bash his nose. But he jerked back just in time, though the motion cost him. He stumbled, blinking rapidly as if trying to clear his vision. She attempted to break free, but his grip tightened again, pressing her shoulders into the cold stone. She could feel his heart pounding as his chest almost touched hers. The closeness churned her stomach. He opened his mouth, about to say something, then snapped it shut. His eyes squeezed shut momentarily. She felt his entire frame tremble. The poison was working, but not fast enough for her liking. She struggled harder, nails scraping at his forearms. He grunted, loosening his hold slightly. That was all she needed. She wrenched an arm free and reached for her belt, where another dagger waited. But before she could draw it, A thunderous crash came from the corridor. Someone had kicked in the door, shouting the Alpha's name. A trio of armed guards spilled into the room, eyes wide as they took in the scene. One guard gasped, "Alpha, are you all right?" Another guard raised his sword, pointing it at Renaya. She cursed under her breath. This was the worst possible outcome. She was cornered, outnumbered, her element of surprise gone. The Alpha tried to speak, but he was too consumed by fighting off the poison. A sheen of sweat covered his brow. She realized with a jolt that if she was captured, her vengeance would slip through her fingers. Everything she had done would be for nothing. Her eyes darted around the chamber. The windows. They were tall but possibly within reach if she could evade the guards. With a burst of desperate energy, she twisted free from the Alpha's grip, ignoring the searing protest of her muscles. She dove for her dropped dagger, snatching it off the floor in a smooth motion. The guards rushed in, swinging their blades. She deflected one strike, feeling the impact jolt up her arm. Another guard lunged, nearly slicing her side, but she sidestepped, driving her dagger into his shoulder. He cried out, staggering back. The third guard tried to tackle her, but she slipped away with a snarl. She glanced at the Alpha. He leaned against the wall, struggling to stay upright. Their gazes locked again, and for an instant, she thought she saw something like regret behind his pain. But she refused to let it sway her. She spun and sprinted for the window, vaulting onto the ledge. One guard shouted for her to halt. Another ran forward. But she kicked away from the wall with every ounce of strength she had. The glass shattered around her, and she felt cold night air whip across her face. For a split second, she was airborne, heart pounding in her throat, before she plummeted into darkness outside the fortress. An instant later, she crashed into a sloped roof below the window, rolling painfully across the shingles. She gritted her teeth against the shock of the landing. Then she skidded off the edge, dropping another several feet into a hay cart parked by the fortress wall. She landed hard, hay flying everywhere. Pain exploded along her arms and ribs, but she forced herself to move. Shouts echoed above. Guards raced to the courtyard. She scrambled from the cart, ignoring the bruises, and dashed into the shadows. Her lungs burned, her thoughts a frantic roar. She had failed to end him, but at least the poison would weaken him. Perhaps it might yet finish the job, if it was potent enough. But she suspected he would receive aid from his pack. And now they knew who she was, at least her face. Panic and anger warred within her. She stumbled through the fortress grounds, clinging to the walls. A group of guards spotted her, hollering for reinforcements. She ducked behind a wagon, then sprinted for a side gate she had noted on Bryce's map. If the gate was locked, she would be trapped, but she had no other path. By some stroke of luck, the gate was open, likely left that way by workers who hadn't yet closed it for the night. She slipped through, ignoring the pain in her side, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Behind her, alarm bells rang, and torches lit up the courtyard. She vanished into the gloom of the outer ward, heading for the distant tree line. Half blinded by terror, she pushed on, ignoring the swirl of her emotions. The memory of the Alpha's amber eyes haunted her with every step, and the knowledge that her plan had collapsed weighed on her like a stone. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob that threatened to break free. She could feel her brother's memory burning at the edge of her thoughts, accusing her of failure. But she was alive. She clung to that. She could try again. If the poison didn't finish him, she would return. There was no turning back. Her entire existence revolved around destroying that Alpha, even if it took every ounce of cunning she possessed. She disappeared into the forest, adrenaline carrying her until she couldn't run any farther. At last, she collapsed against a tree, breathing in ragged gulps of air. Somewhere behind her, the fortress was in turmoil, guards undoubtedly fanning out to search for the intruder. But she had a head start. She had escaped. Doubled over, she felt hot tears streak her cheeks. She had gotten so close. She could practically taste the moment her blade would have ended him. And yet the plan unraveled. She balled her fists, pursing her weakness. Worst of all, a tiny, traitorous part of her felt relieved. A sliver of something unsettling had flared within her when they locked gazes, a spark that nearly halted her breath. She refused to name it. She refused to let it exist. Her brother's face swam before her, and she recalled her vow. Nothing mattered more than vengeance. That was the truth she clung to as she staggered deeper into the forest, enveloped by darkness, leaving her shattered plan and the fortress behind. Rain battered the roof of the modest inn on the outskirts of a human village far from Obsidian Ridge. Renaya had traveled for days on foot, through dense forests and rolling hills, trying to shake the memory of her failed assassination. She hardly slept, haunted by the Alpha's pained expression, by the moment when their eyes locked and something unfathomable passed between them. Each time her mind wandered to that encounter, she felt a throb in her chest that no amount of reasoning could explain. She was furious with herself for allowing a fleeting sense of connection to distract her from her mission. She had come to kill him, to avenge her brother. Instead, she had lost her dagger, revealed her identity, and barely escaped. She sat near the cold hearth in the common room of the inn, her traveling cloak still damp from the downpour. Despite her exhaustion, she felt restless. A small fire crackled weakly, not offering much warmth, but at least enough to dry her boots. The innkeeper, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, offered Raniah a cup of watered-down ale and a plate of bread and stew. Raniah accepted it with a nod of gratitude. She knew she had to keep up her strength. Hiding beneath her hood, she consumed the meal quietly, ignoring the curious glances from the other patrons. Guilt gnawed at her. She had used a powerful toxin on the Alpha, a concoction so deadly it might have killed him if that first strike had been deeper. Although she had every reason to wish him dead, a peculiar dread now weighed on her. Part of her wanted to confirm his demise, but she had fled too quickly to see the results. The image of his confused gaze wouldn't leave her. Had she truly succeeded in poisoning him? Why did she feel an unexpected pang of regret at the possibility? She loathed the conflict churning inside her. She wanted vengeance for her brother, not twisted feelings and uncertain guilt. No matter how she tried to push the thoughts aside, they returned in waves. She swallowed her last bite of stew, then retreated to a corner table. The inn's other guests included a couple of weary travelers discussing mundane events, plus a trio of merchants who were too absorbed in comparing ledgers to pay much attention to her. She took some comfort in the anonymity. Turning inward, she planned her next move. She couldn't stay here long. The Alpha's guards might not know her name, but they had seen her face. If they tracked her scent, or bribed locals, they could find her trail. She wondered if she should slip away to a remote region, or even cross the sea to distant territories. But every time she envisioned a life spent in hiding, far from the forest where her brother's spirit lingered, she recoiled from the thought. Vengeance was her sole purpose, the oath she had made on his grave. She would see it through, even if she spent her final breath in the attempt. Yet now, she faced the undeniable possibility that he was not the killer she had imagined. The Alpha's shock at her accusation had seemed genuine. Could it be an act? Or was there a chance he had been falsely blamed? She clenched her fists, frustration knotted in her gut. too many questions. Too little clarity. Regardless, her immediate focus was survival. She decided she needed more information. Perhaps if she learned how the pack was responding to her infiltration, she would find out if the alpha was dead, gravely ill, or on the warpath. With that thought, she dropped a few coins on the table for the meal, then headed out into the storm. She pulled her hood low, letting the chilly rain pelt her face. In the distance, she saw a pair of road wardens patrolling, their lanterns flickering in the downpour. She slipped past them unnoticed, making her way to the stable behind the inn, where her borrowed horse was stalled. The stable boy was fast asleep on a makeshift pallet by the far wall, so she quietly saddled the horse herself, patting its flank to soothe its nervous shifting. In this weather, few people would be traveling, making it the perfect time to leave. She mounted up, guiding the horse out into the muddy street. Water surged in rivulets along the gutters, and the wind carried the smell of sodden earth. She set off at a measured pace, careful not to draw attention. Her plan was to circle back in the general direction of Obsidian Ridge territory, but without venturing too close. She intended to slip into nearby villages to eavesdrop on rumors, to see if word of the Alpha's condition had leaked beyond pack borders. The journey was miserable. Rain stung her cheeks and soaked through her cloak. Each mile felt like 10 in the swampy terrain. The horse plodded on faithfully, though every so often it tossed its head in discomfort. Raniah guided it gently, whispering soft reassurances. The night stretched on, black and relentless. Eventually, she stopped in a small thicket off the road, where she took shelter beneath the low-hanging branches of a massive spruce. There, she managed to tie the horse in a relatively dry spot. She huddled against the trunk, hugging herself for warmth, and tried to drift into a half sleep. But the patter of rain and her ceaseless tension kept her from any real rest. In her half-doze, memories flitted in and out. Her brother's warm laugh, the day he gave her a hand-carved wolf figurine for her birthday. She remembered how his eyes shone whenever they sparred, how he teased her for always stepping to the left when she was about to strike. She saw again the horror of his mangled body, found at the border of their territory, the devastation that shattered her life. The old rage churned anew, mingling with the bizarre sense of attraction she had felt in the Alpha's presence. She tried to close her eyes and chase away that image of his face contorted in pain, confusion, and something too raw for her to name. When morning finally broke, the rain had lessened to a damp mist. She coaxed the horse forward, continuing her route. Over the next few days, she traveled through a patchwork of villages and trading posts. In each place, she lingered by market stalls or taverns, eavesdropping on any mention of Obsidian Ridge. Most people only discussed common gossip, food shortages, local feuds, the occasional rogue sightings. But one evening, at a roadside tavern called the Rolling Barrel, she overheard a snippet that made her blood run cold. Two men, both wearing cloaks embroidered with a subtle wolf emblem, were whispering in a corner booth. They seemed too refined to be ordinary merchants. Renaya guessed they might be lesser members of the Obsidian Ridge Pack, perhaps traveling incognito. She sipped her ale from a seat near the fireplace, straining her ears to catch their conversation. "Still searching," one man said. The Alpha was hit with something vile, a poison that nearly shut down his ability to shift. He's been weak for days. Roan has taken over many of his duties. Renaya's grip on her mug tightened, her pulse quickening. So he was alive, and the poison had not finished him off. She waited, heart pounding, to hear more. The second man leaned closer to his companion. "I heard he locked himself away in his quarters at first. Hardly anyone was allowed to see him. except the pack's most trusted healer. But apparently, he's stabilized, though still not at full strength. They say he's consumed by some urgent matter, prowling the fortress at night. The guards are on high alert. All of them are itching to find the one who attacked him. A sick feeling churned in Raniah's gut. She set her mug down quietly, forcing her expression to remain neutral, though inside, her emotions clashed. A part of her was relieved that he hadn't died helplessly from the poison. It felt almost dishonorable, in a twisted sense, that she might have killed him with something so underhanded. But a sharper voice within reminded her that vengeance didn't need honor. He had taken her brother's life in cold blood, if she'd believed the rumors. The other half of her mind whispered doubt. Could the stories have been wrong? She risked one more glance at the men. They continued their hushed talk. Some suspect an outsider was responsible for that night, but the beta believes it must be a rogue from a rival pack. I wonder, the first man murmured, swirling his cup. I heard the alpha was acting strange after the attack, as if conflicted. The second man grunted. He's probably furious. Having an assassin slip right into his quarters, his pride took a blow. On top of that, the poison has compromised his senses. Rumor is he can't track scents as sharply as before, at least temporarily. Roan is desperate to locate the culprit before the alpha's frustration boils over. Their conversation shifted to other matters, but Renaya had heard enough. She quietly finished her drink and left coins on the table. Slipping outside into the dusty twilight, she tried to steady the tremor in her hands. The alpha was alive, weakened but recovering, and looking for her. She felt an inexplicable swirl of emotion. Relief, regret, anger, and something else. The knowledge that he was searching, prowling around in the fortress at night, she couldn't stifle a tiny flicker of fascination. Why did she care how he was coping? She shook her head. This was madness. She was supposed to want him dead. And she did, at least, she told herself so. But the seeds of doubt she'd been fighting were germinating. She remembered the shock in his eyes when she hissed that he had killed her brother, how he looked genuinely taken aback. Could there be more to the story? In the years since her brother's death, she had never found a witness who saw the alpha commit the act. All she had was rumor. Scattered accounts of a lethal Obsidian Ridge raid near the time her brother was found. But that didn't necessarily mean he personally delivered the killing blow. It might have been the beta or some other pack warrior. Could the alpha have never even crossed paths with her brother? The possibility churned her stomach. She wanted answers. Yet approaching him again was tantamount to suicide, especially now that he knew her face. She wavered, uncertain how to proceed. The next day, she ended up in another nameless hamlet, lying low at a dingy lodging house. She spent hours pacing in her tiny rented room, replaying every clue she'd gathered, every memory. If she had been mistaken, if the alpha wasn't directly responsible, her vow of vengeance was built on shifting sand. That realization should have relieved her, but it only made her chest ache. She wanted closure. She wanted to look him in the eye and learn the truth, no matter how painful or complicated it might be. Even if he had not been the one to land the fatal blow, perhaps he had ordered it or condoned it. If so, he was still guilty. If not, she had pinned her entire life's purpose on the wrong target. Still, reason told her to run, to vanish somewhere far away until the fortress guard stopped searching. That would be the safer path. But her heart rebelled at the thought of giving up. So she made a choice. She would find a way to meet him once more. Not in a reckless infiltration this time. She would approach carefully, stealthily, perhaps on neutral ground. It was an insane plan. But the alternative, living with these doubts gnawing at her, was unbearable. Under cover of darkness, she saddled her horse again and set off for the fringe territories adjacent to Obsidian Ridge. Her mind raced. She needed a strategy to draw him out. She recalled that the beta, Roan, often oversaw negotiations or border patrols. If she could intercept a patrol, leave a message that only the Alpha would understand, maybe he would come alone. It was a tenuous hope, but desperation fueled her. She traveled for days, slipping past villages and roads, finally stopping at a vantage point high above the ravine that bordered Obsidian Ridge's outer perimeter. From there, she observed the patrols, hoping to spot the beta or any sign of a high-ranking envoy. The ravine was shrouded in mist. Steep cliffs jutted from both sides, with only a narrow dirt path wending along the bottom. A swift creek coursed through the rocks. She camped in a small cave partway up the slope, hidden by tangled vines. 2 days passed in tense vigilance. She saw a handful of patrols, minor squads, none that included an obvious leader. On the morning of the 3rd day, she spotted a larger group winding through the ravine, several wolves in human form, accompanied by a pair of wagons. She focused on one figure at the head of the column, a tall man with an imposing presence. Even from a distance, she could sense his confidence. This must be Roan. She recognized the controlled way he scanned every crag, as if expecting an ambush. She crouched lower, her heart hammering. She needed to deliver her message without getting caught. She pulled a piece of parchment from her satchel, scribbling a few words. "I seek the truth about my brother's death. The Alpha knows the assassin who tried to kill him. Meet me where the old willow stands in the western glade when the moon is high. Come alone." She folded the note, then crept down the slope. She found a vantage point just above the patrol's route. The beta was talking to another man, pointing at the ground as though remarking on tracks. Raniah drew a knife and tied the note around its hilt, then waited. When the beta and his retinue were nearly beneath her, she took careful aim and threw the blade so it landed with a loud clatter on a rocky outcrop just steps from them. Instantly, the patrol leapt into formation, eyes darting around for threats. The beta stooped to pick up the knife, yanking off the parchment. Raniah pressed her body flat behind a boulder, listening to the startled shouts and commands. She could hear the beta reading the note aloud, his voice carried across the ravine walls. "The one who attacked the Alpha claims to want truth," he murmured, sounding skeptical. Then he barked orders for his men to search the area. Raniah smiled grimly. She had no intention of being found. She crawled away, carefully ascending to a higher ledge. The patrol fanned out below, but their vantage was poor. After a quarter hour, the beta called them back, ordering a return to the fortress. She watched as they departed, the wagons rumbling along. She guessed they would deliver the note to the Alpha. Whether he would meet her or send an ambush was impossible to predict. But she had set her trap. Now, she could only wait and pray that the lure of answers would compel the Alpha to come. Over the following days, anticipation gnawed at her. She found the old willow in the western glade easily enough. It was a towering, ancient tree with drooping branches that formed a curtain of leaves. The area around it was quiet, birdsong and the soft rustle of foliage. A small clearing opened on one side, bordered by mossy stones and a shallow pond. Raniah set up a temporary hide in the thick undergrowth, preparing a vantage point from which she could see anyone approaching. On the appointed night, the moon shone full and bright, bathing the glade in pale light. She concealed herself amid the bushes, her heart pounding so fiercely she feared it would give her away. She had no illusions. This could be a trap. A squad of Obsidian Ridge warriors might descend on her at any moment. She balanced a throwing knife in one hand, keen eyes scanning the edges of the clearing. Hours ticked by in tense silence. Then, close to midnight, her heightened senses caught a shift in the breeze. A scent drifted toward her, something that made her wolf stir restlessly within. Her pulse sped up. She recognized the alpha's presence, a distinctive combination of strength and raw energy. She peered through the foliage, and sure enough, he appeared at the edge of the clearing, alone. He was dressed in dark clothing, a hood thrown back, revealing his sharp features in the moonlight. Her stomach twisted at the sight of him, tall, proud, a faint stiffness to his movements that suggested lingering pain. Perhaps the poison had taken a lasting toll. She saw him glance around, muscles tense. He clearly expected danger. Slowly, he approached the willow, pausing beneath its trailing branches. His voice resonated in the hush. "I came alone," he called, not loudly, but loud enough that she could hear. "Though my beta wanted an entire legion to flank me. Show yourself." Raniah's grip on her weapon tightened. She hesitated, wondering if he truly came alone. She tested the air. She detected no other wolves within range, though that didn't rule out the possibility of them waiting farther back. Summoning her courage, she rose from her hiding place, stepping into the glade. Her heart pounded as she confronted the man who had occupied her every waking thought. The moon's light cast silver highlights across his hair and shadowed the hollows of his cheeks. She saw him tense, eyes narrowing. He inhaled, and a flicker of intense emotion crossed his face. She stayed a safe distance away, knife in hand. "So you received my message," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I wasn't sure you'd come." He examined her in silence for a moment. "I had to. You claimed knowledge about your brother, about my possible role in his death. I can't ignore that." He took a careful step closer, as if mindful that she might attack at any second. His eyes swept over her, lingering on the tension in her posture, the fierce set of her features. "Are you all right?" he asked, tone surprisingly gentle, which unsettled her. "You ran off that night, and I wasn't sure if you'd survived the jump." Her brows drew together. Why did he sound concerned? She should be the one demanding answers. "I survived," she said tersely. "I heard you did too. The poison didn't finish you." He gave a short nod. "I won't lie, it was close. My pack's healer worked tirelessly to keep me from succumbing." He paused, his expression darkening. "When I woke, I couldn't stop thinking of you. Of that moment you accused me of murder. Something about Itay." His voice wavered, as if grappling with a truth he couldn't name. "Why do I sense this pull, even though you tried to kill me?" Her pulse skittered. She felt the same throbbing awareness that haunted her since their first encounter. She swallowed, rallying her composure. "I didn't ask you to come here to discuss that," she said curtly, although she knew exactly what he meant. The mate bond. She was certain now. It was the only explanation for the strange tide of emotions whenever they were near each other. "I need to know whether you truly killed my brother, or if someone else acted under your command. I want the truth, or we end this now." She brandished her knife, letting the moonlight glint on its blade. He raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I can only give you my word. If that's not enough, then you might as well put that knife in my heart and see if it helps your pain, because I don't recall ever crossing paths with him." She felt tears threaten, hot behind her eyes. "Tell me everything," she demanded, voice shaking. 3 years ago, my brother's body was found on the outskirts of these territories, broken and drained of life. Witnesses said the Obsidian Ridge Pack attacked a group near that border. Tell me if it was you or your warriors." His gaze flickered. She saw regret there, though not the kind of guilt she expected. 3 years ago, there was indeed a confrontation with a small band that trespassed on our land, he said slowly. But I was away negotiating an alliance at the time. My beta led the patrol in my absence. By the time I returned, the matter was done. They told me a group of rogues was found poaching on Obsidian Ridge territory. My beta insisted the kill was justified, that they were trespassers intent on sabotage. I never saw their faces, and the beta mentioned no names. If your brother was among them, his expression tightened. I had no direct hand in his death. Raniah's breath caught. Rage flared, accompanied by a dizzying swirl of relief and confusion. You swear you had nothing to do with it, she pressed, her heart pounding. On my pack's honor, I swear, he replied, voice steady. If I had personally executed him, I would admit it. I'm not a coward who hides behind others' actions. But if my beta falsely painted your brother as a rogue, or if there was some mistake, then I need to know. She stared at him, tears threatening to spill. For so long, she had fixed the blame squarely on the Alpha, certain he was the cold-blooded murderer. Now, she heard sincerity in his voice that she couldn't dismiss. Why would your beta do that? She whispered. If my brother wasn't a threat, if he was only near the border, the Alpha's jaw tightened. I can't say for sure, but I trust Roan with my life. He's been my second for years. If he lied, or if he overstepped, that's a betrayal of everything I stand for. I'll get to the bottom of it. She gripped her knife, trembling. Her entire world felt tilted. You realize, if it was your beta who gave the order, you're still responsible as the Alpha. Your pack is your burden. He nodded, regret darkening his eyes. I am aware. This is not a burden I shirk. My pack's mistakes are my own. That's why I want answers as well. He paused, voice softer now. I'm sorry for what you've endured, truly. Had I known, I would have investigated your brother's death long ago. Her anger warred with the flicker of compassion rising in her. She had expected cold denial or arrogance, not empathy. She stepped back, struggling to steady her breathing. The night air pressed in, heavy with unspoken tension. So, what now? She managed. I came here ready to demand your life. Now you say your beta might be responsible, or at least complicit in the killing. Do you expect me to just forgive you? His lips curved into a humorless smile. No, I expect no forgiveness. But perhaps we can seek the truth together. If Roan acted unjustly, I need to hold him accountable. That might mean punishing him by pack law. If you stay your hand from killing me, I'll do everything in my power to uncover the facts. If I'm lying, he added, his voice steady with conviction, you can come for my life again. She gazed at him, suspicion and a strange yearning swirling inside her. You'd let me live among your pack after I nearly killed you. He met her eyes, unflinching. I'd keep you close, not just because you deserve justice, but because... He hesitated, the moonlight catching the conflict in his expression. Because we share a bond. I know you feel it as strongly as I do. I don't fully understand it, but I can't deny it any longer. Raniah's cheeks warmed. She hated how much his admission resonated with her own feelings. It was undeniable that an otherworldly tether existed between them, one that felt both electrifying and terrifying. She forced herself to look away, anger bubbling up at her own traitorous heart. My loyalty, is to my brother's memory," she said, clinging to the vow that had shaped her life. "If you're telling the truth, then my quarrel is with your beta. But if you betray me, I'll slit your throat, bond or no bond." He nodded solemnly. "Understood." Then, more quietly, he asked, "Will you come back with me? If I confront Roan publicly, I'll need evidence, and your testimony could be crucial. But you'll be stepping into a den of wolves who want you dead for attacking their alpha. It's a dangerous path." She took a shaky breath. The prospect of voluntarily walking into Obsidian Ridge was daunting. But if she wanted real answers, she had little choice. "All right," she said, voice clipped. "I'll go, but on my terms. I won't let your guards toss me in a cell while you ask questions. And if Roan confesses to killing my brother, I want retribution." He inclined his head. "We'll do this carefully. I'll keep you safe from my own people. And if my beta is guilty, he'll face pack justice. You'll have a voice in his punishment." She tried to read his face, searching for hidden deceptions, but found only grim determination. The moon had drifted behind a cloud, casting the glade in deeper shadow. A hush fell, broken only by the faint chirp of night insects. Raniah felt the final vestiges of her old convictions waver. This man she had sought to murder, the one she believed had brutally ended her brother's life, stood before her offering to help. She turned her face away, clinging to her resentment. She couldn't let her heart soften. "Not yet." "Let's go then," she said gruffly. "I'm tired of waiting." He gave a nod, stepping back. "We should leave under night's cover, but we'll have to move quietly. My beta's watchers might be on the lookout. He'll sense something is off if I return with an outsider." She snorted softly. "I've snuck into your fortress before. Or have you forgotten?" A wry grin touched his lips, despite the tension in his gaze. "Indeed, I recall all too well." He started walking toward the forest's edge, and she fell in step beside him, still gripping her knife. Every so often, their eyes met, and that electric pull vibrated in her core, equal parts enthralling and maddening. She forced her attention on the mission. If the beta was behind her brother's death, she needed to be strong enough to face him. They traveled for hours, weaving through dense groves and rocky hills to approach Obsidian Ridge from the north. Dawn was just a hint on the horizon when the dark silhouette of the fortress came into view, rising against the sky. Memories of her infiltration and narrow escape flickered in Raniah's mind, making her heart pound. This time, she wasn't creeping in as an assassin, but as a potential ally to the Alpha. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. He led her to a hidden side gate near the fortress's western corner, overshadowed by thick vines and stone buttresses. She recognized it from her prior vantage points, one of many lesser-used entries. He signaled for her to wait while he peered around the bend. After a moment, he motioned her forward. They slipped inside the walls, emerging into a quiet courtyard that smelled of fresh dew and old stone. The fortress was stirring with the earliest rays of dawn. Here and there, servants hauled buckets of water. A few bleary-eyed guards stood watch on the parapets. None seemed to notice them. He guided her to a secluded door at the base of a tower, then down a winding stair into lower corridors. She kept her senses on high alert, acutely aware that if they were discovered, she had no illusions the guards would spare her. He pressed a hand lightly against her back, steering her around a corner, and his touch sent an unexpected jolt through her veins. She tensed, glancing back. His gaze met hers, understanding flickering in his eyes. Neither spoke of the bond, but the tension between them thickened. At last, they stopped outside a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands. He pulled a key from beneath his tunic and unlocked it. ushering her inside. The room beyond was a small, windowless chamber furnished with a narrow cot, a desk, and shelves stacked with books. It felt more like a secluded study than a prison cell, though the thick walls offered an air of containment. He closed the door behind them, setting the key on the desk. "You can stay here," he said, his voice low. "It's secure, and only I have the key. It'll keep you hidden from the rest of the pack for now." She eyed the surroundings warily. "So you're locking me in?" His expression was pained. "Out of necessity," he admitted. "If my wolves see you roaming free, they'll react with hostility, especially given your recent attack. Give me time to investigate Roan, to gather any proof. I'll return once I've spoken with him." Her pride bristled at the idea of being confined, but she understood the logic. "And how long am I supposed to wait here?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Not long. A day at most," he said. "I'll bring you food and water. If anything goes wrong, we'll decide our next move." His gaze lingered on her, tension etched in the lines of his face. "This is an uneasy alliance. I understand if you don't trust me, but I won't betray you." She pressed her lips together. Her emotions felt tangled, a knot of fear, curiosity, and a flicker of unwanted warmth. "I'll hold you to that," she said stiffly. "And remember, if you break your word, I will not hesitate to kill you." The threat sounded hollow, even to her, especially when his eyes glimmered with a strange mixture of remorse and longing. He inclined his head. "I appreciate your honesty," he replied softly. For a moment they stood in strained silence. Then he turned toward the door. "Rest if you can. I'll be back soon." With that, he stepped out, locking the door behind him. Raniah exhaled shakily, feeling the tension radiating through her limbs. Here she was, in the belly of the fortress once again, but this time, at the Alpha's invitation. Her mind raced. Could she trust his intentions? She sensed no obvious deception in him, but that didn't quell the panic coiling in her gut. She moved to the cot, sitting on its edge. At least it was better than a damp cave or roadside ditch. A faint oil lamp glowed on the desk, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. She examined the shelves out of curiosity, finding volumes about pack law, genealogies of werewolf bloodlines, and treatises on alliances between territories. Her gaze snagged on one leather-bound tome. It contained old records, including a section about the traditions of the mate bond. She recalled stories from childhood about the moon goddess weaving fates together, binding souls in a connection deeper than mortal love. The bond offered a heightened sense of each other's emotions, sometimes even the ability to share dreams. She shivered. That intangible pull she felt around the Alpha was more than mere physical attraction. Something primal and fated coursed between them. A swirl of dread and exhilaration coiled in her stomach. She pushed the book aside, refusing to let herself dwell on it. Time passed slowly. She paced the room, checking every corner, testing the door. It was solid, no chance of picking the lock. She considered the possibility of escape through the ceiling or floor, but saw no feasible route. With frustration, she settled on the cot, letting her weary body rest. Despite her swirling thoughts, exhaustion overtook her, and she slipped into a fitful sleep. She dreamed of her brother, alive and smiling, leading her by the hand through a sunlit meadow. She felt his warmth, heard the echo of his laughter. Then the meadow darkened, the grass wilted, and she found herself facing the Alpha across a chasm filled with swirling black mist. Their eyes locked, and in the dream, she felt a mixture of anguish and longing. She tried to call out, but her voice cracked. The Alpha reached for her, But she recoiled. Her brother's voice called to her, warning her not to trust. Confusion and sorrow overwhelmed her, and she woke with a jolt, heart pounding, cheeks damp with tears. She sat up, pressing a hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. The lamp on the desk had burned low. It was hard to tell how much time had passed, but it felt like hours. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the previous night. Just as she was about to curse her predicament, the door's lock clicked, and the Alpha stepped inside, carrying a tray of food. He paused upon seeing her startled expression. Guilt flickered across his face. "Did I wake you?" She shook her head, pressing her lips together. "No." He set the tray on the desk, pushing aside a few books. "It's not much, but there's bread, cheese, dried meat, and water. Take what you need." She rose cautiously, approaching the desk. She half expected a trick, but the hunger gnawing at her belly overcame her suspicions for the moment. She tore a piece of bread, chewing slowly. Despite herself, she savored the taste. The Alpha stepped back, folding his arms across his chest, studying her. Even in the dim light, she could see the fatigue shadowing his features. A pang of empathy rippled through her before she could quash it. "How did it go with the beta?" she asked once she'd swallowed, trying to ignore the tension in the air. He sighed, leaning against the wall. He was cautious, as if he sensed something amiss. "I questioned him about the incident 3 years ago. He insisted the group at the border was made up of hostile rogues. He stuck to that story adamantly, but something in his eyes was off. I can't prove it yet, but I suspect he's hiding the full truth." Raniah's fist tightened around a piece of cheese. "If he admitted no guilt, how can we pin my brother's murder on him?" The Alpha ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I need more evidence. There might be records of that patrol, a report from the warriors who accompanied him. If we can speak to one of them in private, we might learn something, but if Roan has threatened them into silence, it will be difficult." She let out a slow breath, remembering how formidable the beta likely was. "And how do we do that without tipping him off?" A determined set etched itself along the Alpha's jaw. "I'll arrange a private gathering of those who were on that mission 3 years ago. I'll claim it's a routine debrief for historical records. Try to catch them off guard. I want you to witness it, hidden, so you can verify if they describe anything that matches your brother's name or appearance." Raniah glanced at him uncertainly. "You want me to hide behind a wall while you question them?" He nodded. "Essentially. There's a room used for council meetings with a small adjoining chamber that shares a ventilation grate. You'll be able to hear everything without being seen. If any contradictions arise in their statements, we'll confront them. And if we still can't get the truth, we'll plan our next steps." She considered the idea, heart pounding. This was the most logical approach. Gather evidence, corner the beta publicly. But the risk was enormous. If the beta discovered she was here, he'd likely attempt to kill her before she could expose him. "When?" she asked at last. "Tonight," the Alpha replied. "I've already set it up. I told the beta we'd hold a small meeting to review old records. He'll bring the men who were on that patrol. He thinks it's a routine check for discrepancies. Hopefully, he won't suspect anything more." She studied the Alpha's face, still torn by lingering distrust. Yet the sincerity in his eyes again shook her resolve to hate him. "Fine," she said, stiffly. "I'll do it." He inclined his head, relief flickering across his features. "You should finish eating and rest. We'll move once dusk falls. Until then, you'll be safe here." He hesitated, as though there was more he wanted to say, but then he turned to leave. At the door, he glanced back. "Thank you for trusting me this far," he murmured, voice low. Then he closed the door, locking it behind him. Raniah let out a shaky exhale, collapsing onto the chair. She tried to finish her meal, but her stomach twisted with nerves. Could she truly rely on him? This man, who she once believed responsible for her brother's death, was now her ally in uncovering the truth. And beyond the immediate danger, the quiet pull of the mate bond hovered, complicating every glance, every exchange. She refused to let that bond overshadow her mission. She had to stay focused on justice for her brother. In the hours that followed, she paced relentlessly, mind reeling with what-ifs. If the beta confessed, would she kill him herself? Would she let the alpha handle the sentencing? And if the beta turned out not to be the culprit, would her quest circle back to the alpha or some other unknown pack member? She nearly drove herself to the brink of panic with these spiraling thoughts. Finally, night fell. Right on time, the door opened again, and the alpha returned. He held a cloak in one hand and a small lantern in the other. "Put this on," he said, offering the cloak. "Keep your face covered. We'll go through a side passage that leads to the council room's hidden chamber." She nodded, quickly obeying. When she stepped up beside him, she noticed tension bracing his shoulders. She recalled the words of the men in the tavern, that the poison had weakened him for days. Now, up close, she sensed a slight frailty in his aura, a fatigue that lingered. Yet there was still a core of strength about him that felt unyielding. The duality tugged at her. She averted her gaze, reminding herself that he was an alpha, fully capable of turning lethal if the moment demanded it. He led her through dimly lit corridors, pausing now and then to listen for footsteps. Servants passed by once, their arms full of linens, but they were too harried to notice the cloaked figure slipping through the shadows. At last, he guided her to a narrow stairwell spiraling up into the fortress's older wing. They ascended quietly, hearts pounding in the hush. At the top of the stairs, they emerged into a short hallway with a single door guarded by 2 pack warriors. Raniah tensed, certain they'd be caught, but the alpha turned instead to a nearly invisible door in the wall. He pressed a hidden latch, revealing a cramped corridor that curved behind the main council chamber. "In here," he whispered, motioning for her to enter. "There's a small vent at the far end. You'll be able to hear everything." She ducked inside, feeling her heart thud as she recalled how precarious this plan was. He closed the secret door behind them. The passage was dark, but the alpha raised the lantern, illuminating old cobwebs and dust. The air smelled stale, thick with the scent of old stone. The space was barely wide enough for them to walk side by side, so she trailed behind him, arms pressed against her body to avoid brushing the walls. At last, they reached the ventilation grate, an iron lattice embedded in the wall that overlooked the council chamber. Carefully, he doused the lantern. Through the grate's thin slits, they could see a wide table illuminated by several torches. Around it sat 6 men, among them Roan, whose demeanor was imposing, and others presumably part of the patrol from 3 years ago. Raniah's pulse thundered. She recognized the beta from the ravine. He was tall, muscular, with dark hair cropped close to his head. He looked confident, leaning back in his chair as though he owned the room. The alpha's jaw tightened at the sight, and he put a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. Then he cleared his throat in the corridor leading to the main door, which evidently connected to the chamber from the other side. A moment later, they heard him enter the council room with measured steps. "Gentlemen," came the alpha's voice, echoing slightly in the stone space. "Thank you for gathering at this late hour. I appreciate your willingness to revisit events from years past. We must ensure our records are complete and accurate. Roan inclined his head respectfully. Of course, Alpha. Though I must admit, I'm curious as to the urgency. This matter was resolved long ago. A faint scraping sound suggested the Alpha was taking a seat at the head of the table. True, but after recent incidents, he said, carefully avoiding details. I need clarity. Our pack has faced accusations of unwarranted violence. I want to confirm that our actions were justified. One of the warriors, an older man with a scar along his jaw, cleared his throat. I was there, Alpha. We found intruders crossing our borders, presumably scouting for an attack. We pursued, as ordered. The Beta led us in the engagement. We neutralized them. There's not much else to say. Renaya leaned closer to the grate, heart pounding. This was the moment she might learn the truth. She prayed the men would slip up. She felt the Alpha shift beside her on the other side of the wall, though she couldn't see his face. And what of the details? The Alpha pressed gently. How many intruders were there? Did they resist capture? Were they armed? Another man answered, voice hesitant. We counted 5. At least, that's what the Beta told us. But I only saw 3 bodies. Maybe the others fled. Roan spoke up with smooth assurance. 2 escaped into the forest. We never found them. The ones we dealt with were armed, refused to surrender. The Alpha paused. Did you confirm they belonged to a hostile pack? Roan frowned. They carried no formal insignia, but all evidence pointed to an opposing group. They refused to identify themselves. Even if they were lone rogues, they were trespassing. The punishment was clear under pack law. A muscle ticked in the Alpha's jaw. I see. Did any survive our interrogation? Roan's tone turned guarded. No, one was barely alive after the fight, but his wounds were fatal. He died before we could glean much. Raniah felt anger boiling inside her. She recalled the state of her brother's body, how battered it had been. If this man had ordered that brutality, she clenched her fists. The Alpha's voice carried calm authority. Is there anyone else here who wishes to add something? Silence stretched. Renaya held her breath, hoping someone would speak up. Finally, one of the younger warriors cleared his throat. I might have seen something. I was new at the time, only assigned to guard the perimeter. I recall one of them tried to speak. He said he'd come in peace, that he got lost. But the Beta silenced him. Roan shot the warrior a sharp look. He was delirious, Roan growled. Could have been a trick. The warrior shrank back, obviously intimidated. Yes, Beta, but he seemed sincere. The Alpha's voice remained steady. Let him finish, Roan. The Beta hesitated, then forced a nod. The warrior shifted uncomfortably. After we subdued them, I saw the Beta approach the wounded man. The man was trying to say something about meeting a relative, but before he got the words out, the Beta ended his life. His tone quivered. It happened so fast, I didn't question it at the time. I thought the Beta was preventing a threat, but now I'm not so sure. Raniah's entire body tensed, a rush of grief mixing with vindication. That had to be her brother, trying to explain he wasn't trespassing out of malicious intent. She bit her lip to stifle the surge of emotion. Beside her, she sensed the Alpha's anger radiating through the wall. Roan let out a sharp laugh. This is ludicrous. Of course I finished him. He was a threat. He could have turned on us at any moment. You were young, easily swayed by pleas. Silence fell again. Raniah could almost taste the tension in the air. Finally, the Alpha spoke, a cool edge to his voice. Thank you for sharing your perspective, he said to the young warrior. Then, directing his words to Roan, he continued, I'm concerned by the possibility that these men were not armed rogues. Did we confirm their identities in any way? Roan's face must have hardened, because his tone dripped with challenge. We had no reason to. They invaded our borders, threatened our territory. We had full authority to kill them under pack law. Yet one of them tried to explain himself. The Alpha countered, calm but firm. If he truly was lost or had peaceful intentions, we should have shown mercy, or at least questioned him properly. The men in this room deserve the truth, Beta. So do I. Roan stood abruptly. Are you questioning my decisions, Alpha? My loyalty? For years, I've served this pack. I do not appreciate being subjected to an inquisition over a long-settled matter. The Alpha's voice tightened with command. Sit down, Roan. Silence. Then came the faint scrape of a chair. I'm not attacking your loyalty, but your actions must be transparent. If you acted in good faith, you have nothing to hide. If you did something else. He paused, as if struggling to maintain composure. I need you to tell me now. Roan's voice was cold. Is there something specific you suspect? Because from where I stand, it seems you're fishing for wrongdoing where there is none. An even quieter beat of silence. Then the Alpha spoke with an undercurrent of heat. Someone came to me with allegations that your patrol killed an innocent man. That you concealed the truth to avoid repercussions. I will not allow any shred of dishonor to cling to Obsidian Ridge. I will root out the guilty party, no matter who it is. Raniah's blood sang in her veins. She willed him to push Roan harder, but she also knew that if the Beta felt cornered, he might grow desperate and lash out. Roan let out a humorless laugh. Allegations? From whom? His tone sharpened. Tell me the name of this accuser, so I can face them directly. That's not your concern, the Alpha replied icily. Your concern is explaining why that wounded man was never properly questioned, and why we have no records of the event except your brief report about hostile rogues. A note of danger crept into Roan's voice. You always trusted my judgment before. What changed? A moment of quiet tension. Then the Alpha said, Perhaps I've learned that not everyone in my pack is as they seem. From the vent, Renaya caught a glimpse of Roan's eyes narrowing. Her wolf senses picked up the shift in the Beta's aura. Anger, suspicion, the stir of violence. She crouched lower, preparing to bolt if he discovered her. The men around the table exchanged uneasy looks. At length, Roan forced a tight smile. If you must question my motives, Alpha, then do it in private. I have nothing to hide, but I will not be humiliated in front of the entire council. Warriors, you're dismissed. He gestured brusquely. The other men hesitated, looking to the Alpha for confirmation. The Alpha nodded. You may leave, but remain on call. I suspect we'll revisit this soon. Chairs scraped, and footsteps echoed as the men departed. Only Roan and the Alpha remained. Raniah felt her heart pounding in her throat, anxious over how this confrontation might unfold. When the door closed, Roan spoke again, voice edged with challenge. Speak plainly. Who gave you these accusations? Where is your so-called witness? Let me face them. The Alpha didn't answer immediately. Through the grate, Raniah saw him leaning forward, knuckles braced on the table. Answer my question first, Beta, he said coolly. Did you kill a man who tried to surrender? Roan bristled. I acted to protect our territory. He was not innocent. And even if he was, I made the call in the heat of battle. You weren't there. He stepped closer to the Alpha, voice dropping in volume. Why this sudden interest in a random nobody? The alpha's tone hardened. Because it matters to someone who deserves answers. The person who attacked me a few nights ago, she claimed you're the one who murdered her brother. If that's true, you drew the wrath of an avenger onto our pack, Roan snorted, crossing his arms. And you believe her. She nearly killed you. Why would you trust a vengeful assassin's claims? The alpha's voice throbbed with anger. Because she believed with all her soul that I was responsible. But now I see that perhaps you manipulated the facts. Did you kill him in cold blood, Roan? Did you lie to protect yourself, letting me take the blame in rumor and gossip? For a heartbeat, Roan was silent. Then he laughed, the sound laced with bitterness. You've grown soft, Alpha. This is what I get for supporting you all these years? Accusations that I'm a murderer or a liar? You think I haven't heard the whispers that you're feeling the mate bond with that assassin? Is that what's driving you to betray your own beta? The alpha tensed visibly. That is none of your concern. And it changes nothing. If you took the life of an innocent man, you'll answer for it. This is not a betrayal, it's justice. Roan's face twisted. Justice? I carried out justice when I put that wretch out of his misery. But since you're so intent on pandering to an attacker, you leave me no choice. In one swift motion, he lunged, grabbing the alpha's tunic. The shift was so sudden that Raniah gasped. If you can't see who your enemies are, I might have to remove you before you ruin this pack, the alpha snarled, wrenching free. He pivoted, slamming Roan against the table. The beta grunted, responding with a savage right hook that caught the alpha's jaw. Renaya watched in alarm, her heart racing. She wanted to rush in, but she also knew the alpha had commanded her to stay hidden. If she intervened now, it might blow the entire plan. Still, the fight looked brutal. The beta was fresh, strong. The alpha was still weakened from the poison, and it showed in how he stumbled. Roan pressed the advantage, shifting to pin the alpha's arm, a sneer on his lips. You should never have doubted me, he snarled. I gave years of service for you, and now you question my judgment over a few worthless wanderers? You're not fit to lead this pack, the alpha rallied, driving an elbow into Roan's side. Pain contorted the beta's face, but he didn't loosen his grip. Muscles strained as the two men grappled, their snarls echoing off the chamber walls. In a burst of movement, the alpha twisted, hooking Roan's leg and sending him crashing to the floor. But the effort cost him. He staggered, chest heaving, evidently drained. Roan rolled to his feet with uncanny speed, fists raised. Raniah's anxiety spiked. She couldn't just watch him get beaten. Summoning her courage, she slipped away from the vent, heading down the hidden corridor to the door that led into the council room. She had no weapon except a small knife concealed at her waist, but it might be enough to tip the scales. She found a latch, her heart thunderous as she lifted it. Then she rushed into the chamber. Roan whirled at the intrusion, eyes widening when he saw her. You, he spat. You're behind this nonsense? She glared at him, stepping between him and the alpha. You killed my brother, she said, voice trembling with barely contained rage. You lied and pinned the blame on this pack. You cost me everything. He bared his teeth, stepping back warily. You made a mistake coming here. I'll finish you just like I finished him. The alpha, panting, laid a hand on Raniah's shoulder as if to steady himself. We have his confession, he rasped. He basically admitted it. Pack law demands he face trial. But somehow, I don't think he'll submit peacefully. Roan's eyes flicked from the alpha to Renaya, a cunning malice shining in them. Peacefully? You're a fool if you think I'll let you drag me down. I'll tear you both apart before I yield. Raniah saw him tense, and in the next instant, he sprang forward, shifting halfway, his nails elongating into claws, canines bared. She reacted with honed reflexes, ducking his swipe and slashing her knife across his thigh. He howled in pain, swinging an arm to knock her aside. She went sprawling, breath whooshing from her lungs. The alpha lunged, tackling Roan, wrestling him against the table. But his earlier weakness flared. Roan surged upright, sending the alpha crashing onto the hard floor. Renaya scrambled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her shoulder, mind whirling. She saw Roan raise a clawed hand, aiming for the alpha's throat. Without hesitation, she flung herself at the beta, slamming into his side. They toppled together, a flurry of limbs. His raw strength was terrifying. He pinned her wrist, twisting until she gasped in pain, forcing her to drop the knife. She scrabbled at his face, nails raking across his cheek. Roan roared, releasing her wrist to grab her throat. A savage growl exploded from the alpha. He staggered upright and grabbed one of the heavy chairs. Summoning what strength remained, he brought it crashing down on Roan's back. The beta grunted, his hold on Raniah loosening. She jerked free, gasping for air, then rolled aside. Before Roan could fully recover, the alpha seized him by the collar. "Enough!" he roared, voice crackling with alpha command. Even wounded, that power lingered in him, enough to make Roan flinch. For a moment, Roan seemed to waver under the aura of the alpha's authority. Then a twisted sneer curled his lips, and he spat blood. "You're weak," he hissed. "You let sentiment sway you. Don't expect me to bow to such frailty." He tried to strike again, but the alpha tightened his grip, forcibly turning Roan to face him. "You killed an innocent," the alpha snapped. "You deceived me and tarnished our pack's honor. You'll face the council's judgment. If you fight me further, I will end you here." Roan's eyes darted around wildly, seeking an escape. He let out a guttural snarl and abruptly lunged forward. But the alpha, anticipating the move, shifted his stance and twisted, sending Roan crashing into the heavy oak table. With a yelp of pain, the beta slumped, blood dripping from his temple. Raniah got to her feet, chest heaving, regaining her knife. She stepped over to stand by the alpha, ready if Roan lashed out again. But the beta stayed down, groaning in pain, too battered to continue. For several long beats, they all stood there, panting. Finally, the alpha lifted his head, meeting Raniah's eyes. She saw the flicker of relief and concern in his gaze. She nodded, though her throat felt tight. It was over, at least for the moment. She turned back to Roan, voice trembling with emotion. "Why did you do it? Why kill my brother if he posed no threat?" Roan spat onto the floor. "He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He wasn't supposed to be there, but I couldn't let word spread that I failed to secure our borders. I told him to get lost. He refused. I used lethal force, simple as that." Her anger flared hot. "You ended a life to save your pride." He gave a bitter laugh, wincing at the agony of his injuries. "Pride, duty, call it what you want. I was the beta. My job was to protect the pack's image. The alpha left me in charge, so I handled it my way. If you want apologies, you won't get them." She could scarcely breathe as grief pounded in her chest. Yet a grim satisfaction filled her, too. She finally had the truth. Her brother wasn't killed by the alpha, but by a callous beta who cared more about covering up a mistake than showing mercy. She turned to the Alpha, tears burning in her eyes. He admits it, she whispered. After all these years, that's all I needed to hear. The Alpha nodded, his features taut. We'll ensure he faces our laws. The council will judge him for murder and deceit. Roan sneered at them both. The council is full of cowards who'll bend to your will. The moment I'm gone, another beta will come. This changes nothing. You're still weak, and this pack will suffer for it. The Alpha inhaled slowly, struggling to control his anger. Take him to the dungeons, he commanded, though the words were directed at no one in particular. He glanced at Renaya. We'll call the guards. They need to witness this. They'll see their beta exposed as a murderer. She nodded, stepping away from Roan to keep a safe distance. The Alpha moved to the door and called out. Within moments, guards rushed in. They froze, stunned to see Roan bloodied on the floor, the Alpha and a hooded stranger in the council chamber. The Alpha spoke with clipped authority, explaining that Roan had attacked him, had admitted to killing innocents, and must be detained. Though the guards looked uncertain, they eventually complied, hauling the beta up and half-dragging him out. Roan glared at Raniah until he disappeared down the corridor. The room was a wreck, chairs overturned, splatters of blood on the polished floor. Raniah realized her entire body trembled, exhaustion and adrenaline colliding. She felt the Alpha's gaze on her. Slowly, she turned. In that moment, everything that happened, her years of hatred, her infiltration, the swirling confusion of the mate bond, clashed within her. She took an unsteady breath. You have your confession, she said quietly. He's the murderer. All this time, I was wrong about you. He touched a bruise forming on his jaw, flinching slightly. I'm sorry your brother died under my pack's watch. If I'd known, I would have sought you out before rumors twisted the truth. She swallowed, tears threatening to spill. I spent years despising you. I poured all my grief into that hatred. Now, I don't know what to feel. He moved closer, cautiously, as if wary of scaring her. I can't bring him back, he murmured, voice tinged with sorrow. But I can give you justice. Roan will stand trial, and if the council condemns him, he'll face execution. She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. She thought she wanted revenge, to strike down the Alpha who stole her brother, but that entire foundation of rage had been misplaced. The real killer was in chains now, awaiting punishment. Where did that leave her? Was her life's purpose suddenly fulfilled or undone? She trembled, shock overwhelming her. Gently, the Alpha touched her elbow, guiding her to a chair. She sank into it, burying her face in her hands. He knelt beside her, despite his own injuries, resting a tentative hand on her arm. She should have recoiled, but she didn't. Through her anger and anguish, a warmth threaded between them, the same eerie bond she had tried to deny. I never wanted you as an enemy, he said softly. If fate had been kinder, we might have met under different circumstances. She gave a shaky laugh. Or not met at all. Then I wouldn't be so confused right now. She lifted her face, finding his gaze in the flickering torchlight. Shadows played across his strong features, highlighting the cut on his cheek and the bruise forming near his temple. Why do I feel this tie to you, even when you were my target? The question fell from her lips before she could stop it. His eyes searched hers. We're mates. You know that as well as I do. A quiet certainty threaded his words, making her heart flutter. I can't explain why the moon goddess would bind us, especially given the circumstances. But I can't deny it. From the moment we clashed, I felt it." He paused, emotion making his voice thicken. "I don't expect you to embrace that bond. Not after all the pain you've been through. But it exists." Her breath caught. A swirl of longing and fear cascaded through her. She wanted to reject him out of loyalty to her brother's memory, to disclaim any bond that tied her to the pack that had destroyed her life. But with Roan exposed as the true culprit, she could no longer pin that tragedy on the Alpha. She was free in a sense, but that freedom came with an unexpected path. "I don't know if I can accept it," she whispered. "Everything is so tangled." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I won't push you. All I ask is that you give us both time to heal. We can deal with the beta, ensure your brother's death is avenged. Then we'll see where we stand." She inhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. "All right. But if at any point I feel unsafe or betrayed," he cut in gently, "I'll give you no reason to feel that way. You have my word." She studied him, noticing the sincerity in his expression. Slowly, she nodded. A breath shuddered out of her. There was so much they needed to process. But for the first time in years, a tiny glimmer of hope flickered, like a candle in a dark room. "Let's go," she said, standing shakily. "I need fresh air." He stood with her, pressing a hand to his side where Roan's blow had likely bruised a rib. A quiet hiss of pain escaped him. She supported him without thinking, slipping an arm under his elbow. The gesture felt oddly natural, though it rattled her. Together, they made their way out of the council chamber, stepping into a hallway still echoing with the aftermath of the fight. Guards were busy clearing debris, while others led Roan away in chains. The beta's furious glare followed them, but Raniah ignored it. His fate was sealed. They continued down the corridor, eventually emerging into a courtyard open to the night sky. The fresh air washed over her, carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass. She let out a breath, gazing at the stars above. The Alpha leaned against a stone pillar, his face etched with fatigue and relief. A hush settled between them, interrupted only by distant murmurs from the guards. Renaya touched her own bruised shoulder, wincing at the flash of pain. "This has all been so surreal," she murmured. "In a single day, the man I believed was my brother's killer turned out to be my potential mate and ally." His lips curved into a faint smile. "Fate has a strange sense of irony." He sobered, eyes searching hers. "If you wish, you may remain in the fortress. I'll grant you a room, your own space. Or if you need time away, I understand. I don't want you to feel imprisoned." Her thoughts whirled. Part of her craved distance, a chance to sort through the flood of emotions without his compelling presence. Another part of her hesitated, knowing the mate bond might ache with separation. She bit her lip, then spoke carefully. "I'll stay, at least until Roan's trial is done, and I'm sure justice is carried out. After that—" She trailed off, uncertain. He inclined his head, acceptance softening his expression. "I'll arrange suitable quarters for you. I appreciate you giving this place a chance, especially after all you've endured. I promise, no one will harm you under my watch." She nodded, swallowing a lump of emotion. She didn't know if she could trust in pack loyalty yet, but she sensed he meant every word. They stood in silence, side by side, the tension between them shifting from hostility to a fragile openness. In that stillness, she reflected on how drastically her life had changed. She had carried bitterness for so long, shaped by the trauma of her brother's death. Now, the path to closure beckoned, albeit in the most unexpected way. At length she said, I suppose we should find somewhere to treat our wounds. Blood stained her clothing in patches, and she noticed the Alpha's side was smeared with red. He gave a tired nod. Come with me. The fortress healer is discreet. We'll avoid the rest of the pack for now. She followed him through the courtyard arches, trying to ignore the warmth blooming in her chest at his proximity. She reminded herself that this was only the beginning of a complicated journey. Her vow to her brother was fulfilled, in a sense. The killer would face justice. Yet she felt unmoored, as if a great weight had been lifted, leaving her exposed and unsure. All she had left was this tenuous alliance, and the persistent thrumming in her veins that whispered of the mate bond she had never imagined. Together, they stepped into the fortress's corridors, leaving the moonlit courtyard behind. Neither could guess what trials lay ahead. But for the first time, Renaya sensed that, perhaps, not all stories of revenge had to end in tragedy. 2 weeks had passed since Roan's arrest, and the fortress thrummed with subdued tension. Word spread that the Beta had challenged the Alpha's authority, resorted to violence, and confessed to killing innocents. He was held under strict guard in the dungeon, and the Council of Elders prepared for a formal trial. The pack was reeling from the revelation that one of their highest-ranked members had betrayed both their laws and their Alpha's trust. During that time, Raniah found herself housed in a modest chamber in a secluded wing of the fortress, far from suspicious eyes. The Alpha insisted on her comfort, providing fresh linens, new clothes, and 3 meals a day delivered by a guard who, while polite, couldn't mask his curiosity about this unknown guest. She spent most of her days quietly exploring the parts of the fortress where she was allowed, always escorted by the Alpha or a guard. With her identity mostly kept secret, she drifted like a phantom through the corridors, absorbing the daily routines of pack life. She discovered a training yard where warriors practiced, a stable filled with spirited horses, a grand hall used for gatherings and feasts. Everywhere she sensed the pack's uncertainty. News traveled quickly among werewolves, and the Beta's crimes sparked distrust. Rumors circulated that the Alpha was searching for a new Beta, one who could restore faith in their leadership. Through it all, he carried himself with weary determination, handling the pack's affairs with measured calm, leaning on his loyal subordinates. Only with Raniah did he drop his guard, showing flashes of vulnerability. She felt conflicted, watching him struggle with the fallout of Roan's betrayal. She had seen enough to know he took his duties seriously, meeting with elders, hearing concerns from rank-and-file members. When he found private moments, he would come to her chamber, checking on her injuries or sharing a simple meal. Each time, the undercurrent of tension flickered between them. The mate bond felt stronger now that they were in close proximity, an invisible thread drawing her toward him. At first, she tried to deny it, but each day it became harder to ignore the warmth she experienced when he was near. One afternoon, she ventured into the fortress gardens, a sprawling enclosure sheltered by tall stone walls. The spring sun cascaded over rows of herbs, flowers, and fruit trees. She paused by a bed of lavender, inhaling the soothing scent. A gentle breeze ruffled her hair. In moments like this, she almost forgot the weight of her past. The clang of distant blacksmiths forging weapons reminded her she was still in werewolf territory. But here, she could breathe, calm herself. Suddenly, she sensed a presence behind her. Turning, she found the Alpha standing a few paces away, hands folded in front of him. She noticed how the sunlight highlighted the faint silver strands at his temples, how his eyes glowed softly with that uncanny warmth. "May I join you?" he asked quietly. She nodded, shifting to make space along the garden path. He stepped closer, gazing at the rows of lavender. I often come here when I need a moment of peace, he said. But it seems you've discovered my hiding spot. A small smile tugged at her lips. It's beautiful. A lot quieter than the corridors with all their whispers. He inclined his head. I'm sorry if the pack's gossip bothers you. They're unsettled, uncertain about the beta's downfall. Some suspect the official story is incomplete. She lowered her gaze. They sense my presence, don't they? Even if they haven't seen me, wolves probably catch an unfamiliar scent. Some do, he admitted. But no one dares question me outright. Not when I've said you're my guest. He paused, shifting his weight. I wanted to speak with you about the upcoming trial. The council wants your testimony. They believe your account is crucial to confirm Roan's confession. Will you stand before them and tell them what you heard? She felt her stomach twist. The idea of facing a room of suspicious werewolves made her uneasy. If it ensures justice for my brother, I'll do it, she said softly. But I won't pretend I'm not nervous. He touched her shoulder gently, the weight of his hand comforting. I'll be there. No one will harm you. She swallowed, meeting his eyes. All right. When is it? Tomorrow at midday, he replied. They'll hold the trial in the Great Hall. The elders will preside, and the pack will be allowed to observe. Roan will have a chance to speak in his defense. After that, they'll call witnesses, including you. Then the elders will pass judgment. She tried to steady her breathing, bracing herself for the final step in securing her brother's justice. A hush settled between them, broken only by the rustle of garden leaves. She traced her hand over a cluster of blossoms, searching for something else to say. Her chest felt tight with conflicting emotions. She wanted closure, but she also dreaded the finality of it. He must have sensed her turmoil, because he gently turned her to face him. You've carried this burden for too long, he said quietly. I wish I could have spared you the years of suffering. She inhaled, fighting the prick of tears. That's in the past. What matters is that my brother's story will finally be heard. Maybe I can let go of my hatred and find a new path. She hesitated, heart hammering as she broached the topic that lingered between them. And what about us? This bond? Do you truly believe we're fated mates? A taut silence fell. His gaze flickered with yearning and uncertainty. Yes, he admitted, voice soft. I feel it every time you're near, like a song in my blood. But I know you're not ready to embrace that, not after everything. She pressed her lips together, uncertain how to respond. A part of her yearned to lean into that bond, to discover the solace and warmth it promised. Another part resisted, still clinging to her old convictions. I'm afraid, she whispered finally. Afraid of losing myself if I let this bond define me. He nodded, empathy etched on his face. It doesn't have to define you. It can be a partnership, a bond that strengthens who you are instead of swallowing you. He paused, as if choosing words carefully. The mate bond is powerful, but it doesn't destroy free will. We can decide, together, how to move forward. She glanced away, tears gathering in her eyes. She had spent so much of her life in the darkness of revenge, alone. The idea of forging a connection, especially one so profound, felt terrifying. Yet his sincerity warmed her soul. I don't want to make promises I can't keep, she said. Not yet, he nodded. Understood. We'll take one step at a time. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. Then, gently, he slipped his hand into hers, lacing their fingers. The contact sent a tremor through her, a heady mix of comfort and excitement. She didn't pull away. Together, they stood there in the garden, holding on to a fragile sense of possibility, unsure where it might lead. The next day dawned with a tension that prickled through the fortress halls. Guards ushered crowds into the great hall, an expansive chamber with high vaulted ceilings and banners displaying the obsidian ridge crest. Rows of wooden benches filled quickly with pack members, curious or anxious about the beta's trial. At the front stood a raised dais where the elders took their seats. The Alpha's official chair, carved from dark oak, occupied the center. Torches burned in sconces along the walls, casting shifting shadows. Renaya waited in an antechamber off to the side, heart pounding. Her hands felt clammy, and she kept adjusting her cloak, uncertain if she truly wanted her face revealed to the entire pack. But she knew this was necessary. She would stand before them and speak the truth. The Alpha, seated beside her, offered a calm presence. He wore more formal attire, a black tunic edged with subtle gold embroidery. Though the tension around his eyes betrayed his nerves, he maintained a steady composure. An attendant stepped in, bowing politely. "Alpha, the council is ready. They await your entrance." He nodded, turning to Raniah. "Stay at my side," he murmured. "You'll be called to testify once the council has heard Roan's defense." She swallowed hard. "All right." Together they walked into the great hall, and the gathered pack fell silent, all eyes fixed on the Alpha. Murmurs rippled through the crowd at the sight of Raniah's hooded figure by his side. She sensed their curious gazes, but tried to keep her chin up, reminding herself that she had a right to be here. The elders stood in deference to the Alpha, who took his seat at the dais. Raniah remained slightly behind him, ignoring the uneasy tremor in her stomach. Across the hall, guards led Roan in chains. He looked haggard, eyes ringed with fatigue, yet his demeanor held a twisted pride. He surveyed the room, meeting stares with a defiant lift of his chin. His gaze lingered on Raniah, a sneer curling his lip. She bristled, gripping the back of the Alpha's chair for steadiness. A wave of hostility emanated from the crowd, clearly. Many pack members felt betrayed by their beta's actions. Others watched intently, uncertain how the trial would unfold. An elder stepped forward, clearing his throat. He was a silver-haired werewolf, whose posture carried the weight of experience. "Beta Roan, you stand accused of murder, deception, and an assault on the Alpha. You have the right to address these charges before the council." Roan cast a dismissive glance at the elders. "I deny nothing," he said bluntly, voice carrying in the hushed chamber. "I did kill intruders who trespassed on our land. I did challenge the Alpha's decisions. If that makes me a criminal, then so be it." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd at his unabashed confession. The elder frowned. "By your own admission, you slew at least one man who attempted to surrender. This violates our code of honor. Do you claim any mitigating factors?" Roan let out a bitter laugh. "Yes. My duty as beta. The pack's security was my priority. If I had shown weakness, it would invite more incursions. I acted in the pack's best interest." A younger elder, eyes blazing, retorted, "Honor is never weakness. Killing an unarmed man is not strength, it's brutality." Roan's lip curled. "Sometimes brutality is required, especially when the Alpha is too naive to do what must be done." The Alpha's hands tightened on the arms of his chair, but he held his composure. He glanced at Raniah, then inclined his head at the elders. The silver-haired elder turned to her. "We understand there is a witness who can speak to these events." Raniah's heart hammered. She stepped forward, lowering her hood to reveal her face. Gasps and murmurs filled the hall. Apparently, Word had not widely spread that she was the same woman who attacked the Alpha. The crowd leaned forward, curious. Roan stared at her with contempt, while the Alpha watched her with an encouraging nod. She cleared her throat, voice trembling slightly. "My name is Raniah. My brother was among the men your beta killed 3 years ago. For that entire time, I believed your Alpha responsible. I swore vengeance. I came here to claim his life, only to learn that Roan acted on his own, without the Alpha's knowledge, and intentionally concealed the truth." She paused, letting her words sink in. The whole was silent. She saw pity in some eyes, suspicion in others. "My brother wandered onto Obsidian Ridge territory by mistake, searching for a safe passage. He never intended harm." Roan snorted, but she pressed on, voice steadier. "When I confronted your Alpha, he promised to seek the truth. We learned that Roan killed my brother in cold blood, then lied to cover it up, allowing rumors that the Alpha himself had carried out the deed. I have witnessed Roan's confession, heard him boast that he showed no mercy. That is why we're here today." An outcry rose from the crowd, a mixture of disgust and anger. Several voices shouted condemnation of Roan, while others demanded more proof. The elder raised his hand, calling for silence. "Is there anyone who can corroborate this?" he asked. A guard stepped forward, bowing. "I was assigned to protect the Alpha. I overheard Roan's admission during his confrontation in the council chamber. He claimed he did it for the pack, but also admitted he never gave those men a fair chance to explain themselves." A second voice rang out, one of the warriors from the old patrol. He, too, confirmed the details. A swirl of shock and outrage coursed through the hall. Roan's supporters, if he had any left, seemed silent or cowed by the weight of evidence. The silver-haired elder faced Roan again. "You have defied the Alpha's leadership, murdered an unarmed trespasser, and deceived the pack. You also engaged in open combat with our Alpha. These crimes are punishable by the highest sentence under pack law." Roan sneered, rattling his chains. "Condemn me if you must, but I've done more for this pack than any of you cowards ever have." The Alpha stood, drawing the attention of all. "Your ambition twisted you into someone unrecognizable, Roan. This pack was meant to be a family, not a place where we murder innocents to hide mistakes. By your own actions, you have turned against us. The sentence is clear: exile or death. The council will decide which, but you will never again walk among us as a free wolf." Roan opened his mouth for a final retort, but a guard clamped a hand over his shoulder, forcing him to his knees. The crowd erupted in shouts. Some demanded his execution, others spat curses at him. Raniah stood still, trembling with an onrush of conflicting feelings: triumph, sorrow, a sense of final release. The elders conferred briefly, then announced their decision. Roan would be executed at dawn, that very next morning, to make an example of him. A hush fell. Renaya felt a wave of uneasy relief. Her brother would have justice at last. With the sentence pronounced, the guards dragged Roan away. His defiant protests echoed off the high walls until they faded down the corridors. The Alpha turned to the pack, voice resonating with resolve. "I know this has shaken your faith in leadership, but we will rebuild trust through transparency and honor. I swear it." Some wolves voiced approval, while others glowered, still unsettled. The tension in the room eased into murmurs as the crowd dispersed. The trial was over. Raniah exhaled shakily, tears prickling her eyes. She had waited 3 long years for this moment. That the closure she expected felt more bittersweet than triumphant. Her brother was still gone, and all the rage she had clung to had nowhere left to go. The Alpha stepped down from the dais, gently ushering her toward a side exit. Outside in a smaller corridor, away from prying eyes, he turned to her. "It's done," he said softly. "He'll pay for his crimes." She nodded, voice tight. "Thank you for giving me a chance to speak, to set the record straight." She hesitated, tears threatening to spill. "I feel strange. I hated this pack for so long, blamed you specifically. Now that the real killer is caught and condemned, I don't know how to move forward." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Healing takes time. You've carried grief and vengeance for years. Let yourself grieve without hatred now. If you wish to, leave this fortress and find a new place. I won't stop you. You're free to choose your path. Or," he hesitated, "you could stay." She looked at him, noting the warmth in his eyes. "Stay? With you? Even after all that's happened?" His gaze flicked to the floor, then back to her. "Only if you want to. I won't force the mate bond on you. But you deserve the chance to see if there's something more for us. A chance at happiness that was taken from you before." Her heart squeezed with conflicting emotions. The fortress, once a symbol of her greatest enemy, now felt oddly like a place where she'd found fragments of truth, and possibly belonging. The mate bond tugged at her, beckoning her to consider a future entwined with his. But fear still hovered. She took a tremulous breath. "I can't decide this instantly. My brother's death still haunts me, but I don't want to keep running. Maybe I'll stay for a while, see if I can learn to let go of the past." A soft light of hope kindled in his expression. "That's all I can ask for, and I'll do everything in my power to help you find peace." They walked together down the corridor, side by side. Guards and onlookers parted for them, curiosity evident in their eyes. Rumors would spread quickly that the Alpha's mysterious guest was the sister of a murdered man, that she was once an assassin but now, perhaps, something else. Raniah sensed the swirl of speculation, but she pushed it aside. She owed no one an explanation but herself. When they reached the courtyard, the Alpha stopped by a low stone bench. He turned to face her, expression gentle. "Are you all right? You look pale." She managed a shaky laugh. "I'm exhausted. This is the first time in 3 years I'm not burning with hatred. It feels disorienting." He nodded, understanding. "Give it time. You can rest now, truly rest, without the weight of vengeance driving you." She slowly lowered herself onto the bench, gazing at the fortress walls that once loomed so menacingly. Today, they felt less like a prison and more like a protective boundary. She let out a sigh, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. "If someone told me a month ago that I'd be sitting here, talking calmly with the Alpha of Obsidian Ridge, I would have called them insane." He sat beside her, leaving a respectful gap. "Life rarely unfolds the way we expect." They fell silent. The sun shone warmly overhead, birds calling from the battlements. She could almost believe in the promise of a fresh start. Almost, but her grief remained, an ache that might never fully disappear. She glanced at him, noticing how his posture relaxed in her presence, as if relieved he no longer had to treat her like a deadly threat. She cleared her throat. "Tomorrow, Roan's execution. Do you want me there?" He studied her face. "That's your choice. If it brings you closure to witness it, you may come. If it hurts too much, you can stay away. The council has asked me to perform the sentence as Alpha, which is customary for traitors at this level." Her stomach churned. She pictured Roan's scornful eyes, the finality of taking a life in retribution. She wasn't sure if seeing that would help, or only scar her further. I don't know yet, she whispered. He placed a reassuring hand atop hers. Decide in your own time. Dawn arrived too swiftly. Renaya found herself restless. Awake before the first rays of sunlight streaked the sky, she left her chamber and wandered to the fortress courtyard. She half expected to find it empty, but a small gathering of pack members stood in a solemn circle near a wooden scaffold erected by the wall. A hush lay over them, the air thick with finality. She realized with a start that the execution would take place here, at first light. Her breath caught. She had told herself she might or might not attend, yet she had drifted to this spot unconsciously, as though guided by a need to see Roan's end. The Alpha stood beside the scaffold, conversing quietly with the elders. The moment he spotted her, he broke away, stepping to her side. "You came," he said softly. She clasped her hands before her, nerves taut. "I wasn't sure until I found myself here." She swallowed, glancing at the scaffold. "I need to see it through, I think." He nodded solemnly. "All right." Roan was brought forth in shackles. Dawn light outlined the hardened planes of his face, but his eyes held no regret. He climbed the scaffold steps unassisted, head high, a final act of defiance. The Alpha ascended as well, accompanied by an elder who read out the formal charges. Murder, treason, deception. The sentence, death. Raniah stood at the edge of the crowd, heart pounding with a strange mixture of dread and final relief. Roan's gaze swept over the gathering before fixing on the Alpha. He said nothing, no desperate pleas or apologies. Instead, he sneered. "Enjoy your moral victory. It won't make this pack safer." The Alpha's face remained impassive, though a muscle ticked in his jaw. "Your cruelty has no place here. May your spirit find peace, despite your crimes." Then, in one swift, practiced motion, he drew a ceremonial blade and ended Roan's life. A collective hush descended as Roan's body slumped. Some pack members closed their eyes, others bowed their heads. The elder pronounced the sentence fulfilled. The executioner's assistants wrapped the corpse, preparing it for an unmarked grave outside pack land. Traitors did not receive honorable burials. Raniah exhaled a trembling breath. She felt no joy in this. Her brother's killer was gone, but it did not bring him back. A quiet emptiness seeped through her, mingled with a sense of resolution. It was over. The Alpha descended the scaffold, a bleakness in his eyes as he handed the blade to an attendant. He paused near her, searching her face. "You have justice," he murmured, voice raw. "Does it help?" She blinked back tears. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I'm glad he can't hurt anyone else. But the grief is still there, and maybe it always will be." He nodded, placing a gentle hand at her elbow. "I understand. Let me know how I can help." She felt a surge of emotion at his genuine concern. "Thank you," she whispered. The crowd began to disperse. The tension in the courtyard lifted, replaced by a somber lull. The Alpha walked with her back to the fortress corridors, a respectful distance between them. When they reached a quieter hallway, he paused, turning to face her. "Now that Roan is gone, you can leave if you wish, or you can stay and see if there's a place for you here. Among my pack." He swallowed, voice unsteady. "A place with me." Her heart fluttered. This was the crossroads she'd feared and anticipated. "I don't know how to be part of a pack," she said, choking back a sob. "Mine was scattered after my brother died, and I was on my own. I've never known any other life." He met her gaze, unwavering. "If you stayed, We'd teach you. We'd find a place for your skills, your courage. You wouldn't have to be alone again." She trembled, tears slipping free. She could sense the sincerity in his words, the longing for her to remain. And beneath that, she felt the mate bond's gentle insistence, a chord resonating in her chest, hinting at a deeper unity than she'd ever experienced. The old Raniah would have scoffed, but so much had changed. Roan's execution ended the chapter of her life, defined by hatred. Now, the future opened up. "I'll stay," she said at last, voice thick with emotion. "For now. I can't promise forever, but I want to see if there's a life for me here, one not consumed by revenge." Relief and gratitude shone in his eyes. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. She allowed it, a warmth blooming that steadied her tremors. In that moment, she realized she was choosing hope over fear, forging a new path she never could have imagined. In the weeks that followed, the fortress settled into a new rhythm. With Roan gone, the Alpha chose a new beta, an older, steady warrior named Alden, respected by the council for his integrity. The pack's morale slowly recovered, buoyed by the knowledge that justice had been served. Tensions eased, though some wolves remained wary of Renaya, the outsider who had nearly assassinated their leader. She kept a low profile, practicing combat drills with the fortress guards, learning the lay of the land, and occasionally assisting the pack's hunt to show her willingness to contribute. It felt strange to cooperate with wolves she once considered enemies, but day by day she built fragile bonds. The Alpha kept her close, encouraging her to join him for small councils, introducing her to elders who were open-minded enough to see past her former vendetta. She marveled at how seamlessly the Alpha managed pack affairs. He listened to disputes, mediated conflicts, ensured resource distribution was fair. It was a far cry from the tyrant she had imagined. With time, she found herself admiring the careful way he balanced authority and compassion, never shirking from tough decisions, but also never forgetting the well-being of his people. One evening, she lingered in the fortress library, a vast room lined with shelves of scrolls and books. She had been studying an old tome about werewolf pack structures, hoping to understand her new environment better. Footsteps approached, and she looked up to see the Alpha entering. He wore a slight smile, warmth in his gaze. "Learning about us?" he teased lightly, nodding at the thick volume in her hands. She closed the book, returning the smile hesitantly. "Trying to. There's a lot I didn't know. I spent my life believing your pack was ruthless." He shook his head, sadness tinging his expression. "We have our flaws, but we're not monsters." He gestured for her to follow him to a seating area near a window. Moonlight spilled through, illuminating a table strewn with papers. They settled into chairs, the hush of the library enveloping them. "I wanted to talk to you," he said, voice low. "The council has proposed a formal alliance with a neighboring pack. They think forging stronger ties will help us rebuild after Roan's betrayal. As part of the arrangement, they want me to host a gathering, maybe a small festival, to demonstrate our unity and good intentions." He paused, eyeing her. "I'd like you to be at my side, officially, as my partner." She blinked, heart thumping. "Partner? You mean openly? Won't that raise questions? Especially among the neighboring pack?" He nodded, lips quirking. "Undoubtedly, but I'm prepared to answer them. If we claim each other as mates, some will question it. Others will see it as a testament to our strength, to the idea that even sworn enemies can find common ground under the moon. Goddess's guidance." She felt a wave of panic and exhilaration. I'm not sure I'm ready for a public declaration, she admitted, twisting her fingers in her lap. People will expect more than I can promise. He leaned forward, expression gentle. I'm not forcing you. I only want you to know that if you wish to make our bond official, I'll stand by you. If not, we can simply say you're an honored guest, a friend of the pack. It's your decision. She inhaled, mind churning. Over the weeks, she had grown closer to him, found comfort in their shared moments. She couldn't deny her heart beat faster whenever she glimpsed his smile or felt his hand brush hers. Yet the magnitude of publicly acknowledging the mate bond frightened her. It felt like a final leap into an unknown future. She licked her lips, voice shaky. Let's call me a friend of the pack for now. I'm not ready to bear the title of Mate before the entire territory. His shoulders relaxed, a soft acceptance in his eyes. As you wish. I'm here whenever you feel differently. She nodded gratefully, relieved he didn't press the matter. Their relationship was already evolving in ways that left her breathless. Late-night conversations, stolen glances, the comfort of his presence, it all hinted at a profound connection. But a lifetime of grief and mistrust wasn't easily cast aside. They ended up chatting about mundane things, arrangements for the upcoming festival, the selection of pack huntsmen to cater the feast, the best ways to ensure security. She found herself enjoying the normalcy, the sense of contributing ideas. When they parted for the night, he squeezed her hand in a gentle farewell. Her skin tingled where his fingers brushed hers. The festival came faster than she expected. Tents were erected in the fortress courtyard, colorful banners hung from the walls, and the aroma of roasted meats and fresh bread filled the air. Wolves from both Obsidian Ridge and the visiting pack mingled, forging new friendships and alliances. Laughter rang where once there had been suspicion. Raniah hovered at the fringes, uncertain how much she should involve herself. But the Alpha found her amid the crowd, urging her to sample the festivities, to meet the visitors. She mustered her courage, letting him guide her to a table where important delegates were seated. They greeted her politely, though some eyebrows rose at her introduction as a special guest of the Alpha. She returned their polite smiles, feeling the weight of scrutiny. Yet she noticed how the Alpha's presence at her side gave her confidence. He ensured no one pried too deeply into her past. The day wore on with dancing, friendly competitions, and toasts to unity. By the time dusk settled, lanterns glowed overhead, and the courtyard brimmed with revelry. Music drifted through the night air, and couples swirled in lively dances. Renaya stood by a decorative fountain, feeling out of place in the cheerful chaos. Then the Alpha appeared, offering his arm. "Will you dance with me?" he asked, voice warm with invitation. Her heart lurched. She had never been much of a dancer, and certainly not at a grand affair like this. Yet she found herself nodding, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. He led her to the center of the courtyard, where laughter and music mingled. Other pairs spun gracefully. She swallowed hard, letting him place a hand at her waist and gently guide her into the rhythm. At first, she felt stiff, self-conscious under so many watchful eyes. But his calm presence coaxed her to relax. The music's lilting melody seemed to carry her steps. Gradually, she began to move in tandem with him, heartbeat sinking to his. She gazed up, meeting his eyes in the lantern light, her breath caught at the tenderness she saw there. The mate bond hummed softly, a living current between them. "Thank you," he whispered, leaning closer so only she could hear. "For giving us a chance." Emotions swelled in her chest, gratitude, lingering sorrow, cautious hope. She thought of her brother, how he might have teased her for dancing with the man she once despised. A tear slipped down her cheek, but it wasn't purely from sadness. She realized that in this moment, she felt something she hadn't known in years: contentment, the faint promise of happiness. He saw her tear, concern flickering. She shook her head, offering a fragile smile. "I'm all right," she murmured. "It's just a lot to take in." He tightened his hold slightly, guiding her through a gentle turn. They swayed in comfortable silence, surrounded by a crowd of dancers who were lost in their own joy. When the song ended, applause rippled through the courtyard. Renaya and the Alpha slowed to a stop, still in each other's arms. She glanced around, cheeks flushing at the attention. A few werewolves clapped politely, while others exchanged whispers. She let out a shaky breath and stepped back. The Alpha led her away from the crowd, weaving through the throng until they reached a secluded corner by the garden archway. Fireflies flitted among the blossoms, casting tiny sparks of light. She leaned against the stone wall, heart still fluttering. He stood before her, hands resting lightly at his sides. "Raniah," he said softly, her name caressing his lips. "You've shown such resilience. I can't pretend to fully understand your pain, but I admire your strength more than words can convey. I hope you find a sense of belonging here." She looked up into his eyes, searching their depths. "I already feel safer than I ever have," she admitted, voice trembling. "I was so lost for so long, fueled only by revenge. Now that it's over, I have to figure out who I am again." He took a tentative step closer, leaving mere inches between them. The garden's lamp cast a warm glow on his features. "I'd like to be part of that journey, if you'll let me. If that means waiting until you're ready, I will." Her breath came quicker, anticipation and fear colliding. She thought of all the nights she spent alone, haunted by ghosts of the past. Then she thought of the last few weeks, the Alpha's quiet support, the gentle way he touched her hand or offered a comforting word. The bond they shared was a living pulse, as inescapable as the moon in the sky. Slowly, she reached up, letting her fingers brush his cheek. He tilted his head into her touch, eyes fluttering closed for a moment. It felt like the simplest gesture of acceptance. When he reopened his eyes, they burned with longing. "Raniah," he whispered. She closed the remaining distance, lifting onto her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, a soft exploration, as though each was still unsure of the other's reaction. Then the undercurrent of the mate bond surged, and warmth blossomed in her chest. It felt like coming home, a sensation of utter rightness that made her heart ache and soar at once. She realized tears slipped from her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. He drew her closer, the tension in his posture melting away. She heard a soft hum in her ears, as though the world receded, leaving only the two of them in this moonlit moment. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, breath mingling. "I'm scared," she admitted in a trembling whisper. "But I want to see where this leads." He pulled back to meet her gaze, a tender smile shaping his lips. "Then we'll figure it out together." She nodded, and he brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Is it strange," she murmured, "that the man I once vowed to kill is now the only person I trust?" His expression turned wry. "A bit, but I'll never regret how fate brought us together, however twisted the path." She released a soft laugh, wiping her tears. "Me neither." They stood there in the hush of the garden, hearts thudding in unison. Beyond the walls, the festival continued, music and laughter drifting on the night breeze. She thought she heard a few curious footsteps approaching, then receding, giving them space. The fortress was no longer an enemy stronghold to her, but a place where she'd found truth, justice, and a bond she could no longer deny. In the days that followed, a new sense of normalcy emerged. The Alpha introduced Renaya to the pack, explaining that she had once sought retribution for her brother, but had uncovered the truth and chosen to remain among them. Some were wary, some curious, and others openly accepting. Raniah found genuine friendships blossoming with a few of the younger wolves who admired her tenacity. She helped train them, honing their reflexes with the same meticulous attention she once used in planning her infiltration. Day by day, her place in the fortress grew firmer. The night of the festival kiss became a turning point for her and the Alpha. While they hadn't officially declared their mate bond in a formal ceremony, the entire pack sensed their closeness. She began spending quiet evenings in his study, sharing news or reading by the fire. They spoke of childhood memories, joys, and sorrows. He showed her the ledger of every pack member, explaining each family's lineage, making sure she felt included in the tapestry of their community. One afternoon, she visited the old training yard, where she remembered seeing the fortress warriors practice. Stepping onto the packed dirt, she gripped a wooden practice sword, recalling her brother's face. A flicker of sadness coursed through her, but it was softer now. She took a stance, exhaling slowly. As she moved through the forms, she felt his presence in her heart, guiding her. She smiled, tears blurring her vision. Maybe this was how she'd honor him, by living, by protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, by forging bonds instead of letting hatred consume her. She was so focused that she didn't notice the Alpha until he stood at the edge of the yard, arms folded, watching her with a fond expression. "Your technique is impressive," he remarked when she finally paused. She lowered the sword, cheeks warm. "My brother taught me a lot before everything happened." He nodded, stepping closer. "Would you teach our younger recruits? They could learn a lot from someone with your agility." A thrill of pride and apprehension stirred in her. "You want me to train them?" "Yes." His eyes were steady. "You have remarkable skill and discipline. The pack could benefit from your knowledge. And it might help you find a sense of purpose here." Her heart budded. For so long, she'd defined her purpose by revenge. Now, she had a chance to build something new, protecting, nurturing. The idea terrified and excited her. She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it." He smiled, relief shining in his eyes. Then he pulled her into a light embrace, mindful not to cross boundaries in such a public place, but unable to hide his affection. She let herself relax against him, grateful for his support. The few warriors present averted their eyes politely, but she sensed their acceptance. Maybe their Alpha's choice in a mate, even if unannounced, was something they could support if it made him happy and benefited the pack. Over the ensuing weeks, Raniah threw herself into the role of mentor, drilling young wolves in footwork and strategy. She found satisfaction in watching them improve, their confidence growing under her tutelage. At night, she returned to her chamber, sometimes reading old accounts of her own lineage, other times simply gazing out the window at the moonlit courtyard. Each day, the fortress felt more like home. Eventually, the Alpha arranged a council session to formally acknowledge Raniah's contributions and allow her to declare her intentions. The entire pack assembled in the Great Hall, now a place of new memories rather than a site of grim trials. Elders spoke kindly of Raniah's skill and dedication. Warriors she trained praised her patience and guidance. A hush fell as the Alpha rose, beckoning her forward. She stood beside him, nerves fluttering. He turned to her, voice resonating with warmth. You came to us as an outsider, burdened by pain. Through courage and honesty, you helped us expose injustice. You've honored us by sharing your strength, training our young wolves. I ask the pack to welcome you fully, as one of our come you fully. Own. A chorus of agreement rippled through the hall, scattered applause echoing among the columns. Raniah's throat constricted. She hadn't expected such acceptance. Some older wolves offered nods, while the younger ones who trained under her cheered. Tears burned in her eyes, but she held them back, lifting her chin in gratitude. The alpha faced her, gently taking her hand. "Renaya," he said, voice softer. "Will you officially join the Obsidian Ridge Pack?" She swallowed, glimpsing an unspoken second question in his gaze, one about whether she would claim him as her mate. The entire pack seemed to hold its breath. She exhaled slowly, tears dampening her lashes as she met his eyes. She recalled her brother's smile, imagined him cheering her on from the spirit realm. She thought of the vow she once made, to live only for revenge. That vow was broken. But in its place, she found something else. Love, belonging, a future. "Yes," she said, voice trembling with conviction. "I'll join the pack. I'll stand beside you to protect and guide it." A surge of approval rose from the crowd, the sound reverberating in her bones. The alpha squeezed her hand, relief shining in his face. Then, as if reading her unspoken feelings, he spoke again. "I also ask if you'll allow me to court you publicly as my mate. No pressure, but I want to share this life with you. If you're willing." She paused, the final leap laid before her. The mate bond pulsed like a drumbeat in her veins. She remembered the first time she saw him, how she burned with hatred. Now, in the same fortress, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This was her choice. Quietly, she answered, "Yes, I'm ready to see where this bond leads." A roar of approval erupted, wolves howling in celebration. The sound startled her. She had never heard a pack's communal cry of acceptance. Joy and relief cascaded through her, tears sliding down her cheeks unabashedly. The alpha slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. She leaned into him, letting the collective warmth of the pack wash over her. Though they would still need an official mate ceremony if they chose, this was enough for now, a public acknowledgement that they belonged to each other, that she was no longer an outsider haunted by vengeance, but a woman forging a new destiny. The crowd parted, allowing them a moment of privacy at the foot of the dais. He brushed a tear from her cheek, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I promise to honor you, protect you. We'll face the future together," he murmured. She managed a teary smile. "I believe you," she whispered, feeling the last vestiges of her old bitterness crumble. She wasn't certain what challenges lay ahead. Life in a werewolf pack was no fairy tale. But she would stand strong, forging a path of her own choosing, with him by her side. They shared a tender kiss before the gathered wolves, sealing their union in spirit if not yet in formal ceremony. Applause thundered anew, and the alpha turned, addressing the pack with pride in his voice. "Let our new sister and future mate be welcomed fully among us. Her courage is an example of how we can overcome old wounds to build a better tomorrow." Raniah closed her eyes, letting the cheers resonate, letting the moment settle in her heart. She thought of her brother one final time, whispering a silent farewell to the anger and grief that bound her for so long. She felt certain he would be proud of her choice, to live, to love, to find purpose again. As the pack dispersed, she and the alpha lingered in the hall, hands clasped. A swirl of excitement and tranquility enveloped them. Their story had begun in blood and hatred, shaped by tragedy and betrayal. But the moon goddess, in her mysterious wisdom, had guided them to an unexpected bond. He had killed her brother, so she believed, but the truth revealed a different path. Now, they stood on the threshold of a shared future, forging a new life from the ashes of the past. In that moment, as he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, Raniah felt a surging sense of hope. Their journey wouldn't be simple. She was still learning to navigate pack dynamics, to trust fully, to open her heart without fear of loss. But together, they would overcome whatever trials came next. Step by step, they would heal old wounds and discover the richness that came from a union meant to be. Two adversaries turned mates, bound by fate and sealed by choice.